You awake? I'm sitting in the dark in the kitchen, just looking at the eviction notice on the table.
Dad, it's nearly 11. I'm at a benefit with Julian's partners. Can this wait?
No, it can't. I saw the post. The blue Porsche. Success is a choice? That's what he wrote?
It's a business expense, Dad. For the brand. You wouldn't understand how the VC world works.
I understand that car costs $50,000. Exactly what I handed you in a paper envelope 3 months ago. My entire pension, Beatrice. You said it was for his startup.
It is for the startup. Image is everything in tech. If he looks successful, he gets the funding.
I'm about to lose the house. The lights are flickering because I'm behind on the electric. Me. The man who wired half this city. I just need 2,000 back. Just to breathe.
I can't just ask him for money right now. It makes me look desperate in front of his parents. Julian says you're being petty. You gave that money as a gift for our future.
A gift? I worked 30 years of double shifts for that gift. I have copper burns on my hands that never healed, so you could go to Northwestern. And now I'm petty for wanting to keep a roof over my head?
Honestly, Dad, the way you're stalking our socials is creepy. Julian's right. You're stuck in a blue-collar mindset. You're ruining the vibe for the Apex launch.
The vibe. Is that why my name wasn't on the wedding program? Why you sat me at table 14 behind a concrete pillar? Next to the kitchen trash?
You wore a rented tux that smelled like motor oil. I was trying to protect you from the comments people were making.
No. You were protecting your brand. You even changed your last name on the holiday cards. Wiped Thorne right off the paper.
Sinclair sounds better for the firm. Everyone agreed.
Everyone? Or just the people who think Bridgeport is a peasant hobby?
Look, I have to go. They're announcing the keynote. Don't text me again tonight. You're embarrassing me.
I just got the VIP invite for the Apex ribbon cutting. Black tie, mandatory. 0 exceptions. You didn't send this because you wanted me there. You sent it to show me the world I'm not allowed to touch.
Julian sent that as a mercy invite. Just stay in the back if you actually show up. And for God's sake, wash the grease off your nails. Where are you? The ribbon cutting started 20 minutes ago. Julian is telling everyone you're indisposed at a clinic. If you're late, don't even bother coming in.
I'm in the building, B, but I'm currently under a Tesla in parking level P3.
What? Are you drunk? Get up here now.
There was a smash-up. A lady was pinned inside. The electronic locks bricked. She was suffocating. I had to rip the manual override with my bare hands. I'm covered in hydraulic fluid. My shirt is ruined.
Oh my God. Dad, you cannot come up here looking like that. Julian will lose his mind. Hide in the utility closet. I'll send a car to take you home.
Hide? I just saved a life while your husband was popping bubbly. I'm coming up.
Dad, no. Don't you dare. You'll ruin everything we worked for. You actually did it. You walked right into the middle of the circle. James Sterling is staring at you like you're a homeless person. Julian is telling them you're an outreach mascot. I can't even look at you.
Look at the lady standing next to me. Beatrice. The one who just walked off the elevator.
Wait, why is Leonora Vance hugging you? Why is she holding your hand?
Because she was the lady in the car. And she just heard everything, Julian whispered to me before she stepped out. She heard him call me trash through the backup monitors.
Dad, please. Julian is hyperventilating. Leonora just pulled the funding. She's talking about a fraud lawsuit over the $50,000. Please tell her it was a misunderstanding.
For the first time in 30 years, the circuit is closed. The lights are back on, B, and you're the one standing in the dark.
Answer me. Dad?
I rolled into my son-in-law's flashy grand opening, dripping with motor oil and elbow grease, and the golden boy just hit me with this dead-eyed sneer. Acted like this old-timer was straight-up street trash. Dude put me on blast right in front of the ace. Heavy hitters and city bigwigs packing the room. But joke's on him, he didn't know that in a hot minute, his billion-dollar glass castle was about to go pitch black, and the only cat holding the keys to fix it was me. What's up, folks? Welcome to the channel. Before we jump back into the exact second my own family tried to play me, do me a solid. Smash that like button, sub to the page, and drop your city in the comments. How would you handle this disrespect? Just a heads up, this tale is pure fiction. We cranked up the drama to drop some real-life wisdom and give you something to chew on. You ain't just running behind. Elias, you're a damn liability. Julian Sinclair's voice cut across that 85th floor penthouse like a switchblade, making every high roller snap their necks to stare at my busted, oil-soaked flannel. I just froze. Elias Thorne, a 60-year-old Sparky, whose bare hands wired up half the downtown skyline, suddenly feeling like a dirty trespasser in some crystal fortress. That swanky Apex lounge was nothing but blinding white stone and hidden lights that practically burned my retinas. I caught a glimpse of my own paws, thick black sludge, jammed deep into my calluses and crammed tight under my chewed-up nails. 38-year-old Julian Sinclair, some hotshot partner at a massive VC firm, tapped his $10,000 Rolex with a arrogant grin that completely bypassed his dead, shark-like eyes. He posted up right in the middle of the floor, the absolute poster boy for Chicago's 1%, rocking a custom-fit tux that definitely ran him more cash than my first pickup. The nasty, bitter stench of machine fluid baking off my jacket totally hijacked the room's vibe of high-end cologne and top-shelf liquor. Every bit of tech, polite chatter and clinking champagne flutes died on the spot, leaving a dead air so thick I caught the buzz of the massive power transformers grinding away 3 levels down. You even grasp what tonight means for sterling tech? Julian barked, keeping it quiet but letting the venom bounce all the way to the skyline glass. Look in the mirror, old man. You look like you just dragged yourself out of a gutter. I choked back the spit pooling in my mouth, my brain still locked on. That freezing cement down in the parking deck and the sheer panic on that lady's face. 85 stories in the sky, and all I breathed in was the raw grime of the South Side clinging to my bones. I was way out of my lane, and Julian drove that point home with one nasty chuckle. It was a straight-up character assassination, executed right in front of the heavy hitters I actually wanted to win over for my little girl's future. The guy waved his arm at the massive windows, showcasing the grid illuminated, like a glowing circuit board. We're talking $1 billion rollout here, Elias. We don't have the bandwidth for your ghetto sob stories or your blue-collar mess-ups. He closed the gap, hitting me with a suffocating cloud of designer fragrance and barely contained fury. The punk actually told me Beatrice needed a pops who leveled up her status, not some bum bleeding motor oil all over a 5-figure carpet. I dug deep to speak up, to explain the lethal glitch. Down in level P3, how I had to rip the manual release with my own bare fists to stop some poor soul from getting crushed inside a dead EV. But Julian shut me down with a look of pure disgust that turned my decades of blood and sweat into a badge of shame. How are you supposed to explain to a suit who only respects portfolio gains that sacrificing a clean button down just kept someone breathing? That's when it clicked. I wasn't on his VIP list. To him, I was just a glitch, wrecking his flawless aesthetic. He got right in my ear, dropping his tone to a hiss that hit me harder than a screaming match. He told me I needed to take my broke self back to Bridgeport, where the darkness covers up the dirt. Then came the gut punch, the exact sentence that made this slick. Marble feel like quicksand under my work boots. Julian let it slip that he wasn't just running his mouth off his own ego. He swore up and down that Beatrice explicitly ordered him to deal with me if I dared to roll through looking like blue-collar garbage. When that yuppie aimed his manicured finger at my ruined sleeve, I knew he wasn't flying solo. He was, acting as my daughter's mouthpiece. I locked eyes with Beatrice, praying the kid I fed with hard-earned, dirty cash would step up and shut down her husband's toxic garbage with the real story. Beatrice Thorne Vance, my 32-year-old blood, was playing the fierce boss lady in her high-end silk, but she couldn't even look at me, dodging my gaze with the guilty flinch of somebody trying to cover up an ugly secret. That harsh, freezing blue coming off the overheads bounced right off her chrome dress, turning her into something just as cold and robotic as the concrete towers I'd spent 40 years wiring up. It hit me like a sick joke when she stayed glued to her spot. Turns out, she was the shot caller who told the bouncers to block any rough-looking characters from her billion-dollar party. completely blind to the fact her little screening process would catch her own. Old man. I took a step forward, my steel toes grinding faint, greasy footprints straight into that flawless floor Julian was so desperate to. Bia. Look at me, I choked out. My own voice didn't even belong in this bougie glass palace. Things went sideways down in the parking deck. Some lady got pinned. I had to bust open the emergency latch. I stood there, dying for a spark of recognition. From the same kid who used to toss me an ice-cold tall boy after a grueling 12-hour grind at the power plant. Nothing. Just a hard clench of her jaw. That snake Julian Sinclair posted up right next to her, smirking like a wolf who cornered his dinner, eating up the drama like he just scored the ultimate payout. B just stared at the nasty black grease smeared all over my jacket, cringing hard as the stench of motor oil messed with her overpriced designer fragrance. Not saying a word. That dead silence was a suffocating weight, crushing every ounce of love and sweat I'd poured into her over the past 30 years, leaving behind nothing but burnt ashes. I wanted to scream that some poor girl was fighting for her life down there, that I was the only soul who heard her pounding on the windows, but my throat completely closed up. Beatrice finally cracked. Her tone was straight ice, slicing right through me. Dad. Seriously, check yourself, she spat under her breath, her voice barely cutting over the fancy AC hum. You are making Julian look like a fool in front of the big bosses. You're trashing the whole high-class vibe he busted his ass to curate. The room spun on me. This wasn't just about my dirty clothes. This was about her fronting. You ever have your own kid stare you down like you're some piece of trash ruining their picture-perfect world? Man. That kind of deep freeze makes the worst. Chicago blizzard feel like a summer breeze. She leaned closer, refusing to even make eye contact, looking right past my face. Hit the freight lift out back. Right now, before somebody snaps a pic and goes viral. I just stared at the dull metal of the button she was pointing at. The back door. The one meant for the cleaning crew, the delivery guys, and the nobodies. Standing there, completely broken by the same girl I broke my back to protect, she dropped the ultimate bomb. She'd been feeding Julian some fake story about me being a former corporate big shot, a completely scrubbed past, because she couldn't stomach the truth that her pops was a blue-collar Sparky who got his hands dirty to put food on the table. I spun around, the loud grinding of the freight lift groaning like a death knell. Right as those heavy metal doors started to close, I caught Julian sliding up close to Beatrice, whispering some sweet victory in her ear. And she just nodded along. Going down didn't even feel like an elevator drop. Felt like getting shoved alive into a metal casket, watching the glowing red floor numbers tick backwards, clocking the last few heartbeats of my self-respect. When those steel plates locked tight, shutting me out of that flashy, bright party, that snapshot of Julian talking trash right into my kid's ear, was permanently seared. Into my brain. She agreed with him. That tiny little bob of her head completely snapped the last tie I had to the daughter I raised. I was just standing there alone under the buzzing, cheap lights of the utility shaft, boxed in by dingy mop buckets, gallon jugs of industrial cleaner, and the choking, chemical stink of pure ammonia and fake lavender spray. The whole box shook with this deep rumble, just the massive ventilation system, fighting off the brutal winter cold outside. I glanced over at this beat-up clipboard swinging on the wall by the control panel. It was a typed-out block list for the bouncers working tonight. My chest tightened up when I spotted my own name, dead center at the top, printed in bold black ink. Julian wasn't just acting on the fly. That bastard had planned to humiliate me way in advance, rigging the deck before I even stepped foot in the casino. I patted my jacket where that sketchy contact card from the parking deck was stashed, but my hands were totally frozen. Felt like the chill from the elevator was seeping straight into my bones. Just a ghost in the machine, I mumbled at the smudged mirror, staring at some old man I didn't even recognize. Staring back with grease-smudged eyes and a totally wrecked face. 85 floors. That's the drop. Not talking about actual distance, but plunging rock bottom in the eyes of the little girl. I taught how to pedal it too. That heavy-ass pressure was crushing me right down into the concrete of a high-rise I built with my own two hands, a joint I wasn't even allowed to set foot in anymore. Soon as those elevator doors dinged open on the ground level, I walked out into the side entrance. Some massive stretch of dark shadows and tinted glass. Nobody waiting for me down there except that loud, annoying ringing buzzing in my own head. I made my way straight for those chunky brass exit doors, feeling the deep rumble of the generators vibrating right inside my ribs, like a heartbeat fading to flat. The second I hit the doorway, that freezing Chicago hawk started screaming through the window seams, sounding like some miserable ghost crying over a ton of broken dreams. Right then, my late wife Margaret's voice hit me, loud and crystal clear, inside my own quiet headspace. She always had a sixth sense for when I was falling apart. "Keep your chin up, Elias." I swear I heard her whisper. "Thorne, guys don't fold just because the wind blows hard." Got me thinking, at what point does your own kid stop being family and turn into some total stranger rocking your last name? I froze with my hand on the brass, letting it sink in that the vow I swore to my old lady was literally the last piece of me remaining in this whole fake-ass city of smoke and mirrors. I dug deep down into my jacket pocket, skipping the useless plastic swipe card, my fingers wrapping around the jagged metal teeth of the master key, the manual override for the whole damn property's power grid. That punk, Julian, was too busy judging my grease-stained collar to remember I still had the keys to his shiny new kingdom right in my pocket. I squeezed that exit handle hard, but the absolute second a single snowflake hit my knuckles, the 20 yen, whole street started blurring out, dragging me right back into the brutal, gray misery from 5 years back. All that slick modern steel and glass just disappeared, swapping out for that nasty, chemical bleach stink of a joint where ain't no damn master key in the world gonna fix what's broken. The steady, robotic beeping from the vitals machine was the only sound stopping that dead quiet hospital room from eating me completely alive. Standing there in the high-rise half a decade later, the cold metal under my grip practically melted away until it felt exactly like the dry, freezing skin of my dying wife's hand. Margaret Thorne, the woman I'd been married to for 32 years, was buried under those cheap, scratchy sheets, her crazy strong hustle fading down to a tiny spark, fighting a losing battle against a heart that was giving out. I stared out at that weak winter sunlight, trying to punch its way through the thick, gray Chicago smog outside the glass at Mercy Hospital. Look, I've blown my entire life bossing around high-voltage circuits, managing massive electrical loads, and making damn sure the city's lights stay on. But sitting in that bleached-out room, I felt the absolute dead-end uselessness of a drained battery. Watching those cheap fluorescent bulbs buzzing and flickering out in the hallway through the open door was just a slap in the face. A sick joke proving the rest of the world was still running hot, while my own engine was stalling out for good. Margaret finally blinked her eyes open, looking around the room all cloudy and panicking like she was lost. "Beatrice," she croaked out, her voice barely even a whisper anymore. "Is she down at the library?" I gave her hand a soft squeeze, trying to pull her back to earth. "She's on her way, Maggie. Just take it easy." She managed to smile right then, a tiny, smart-ass smirk that just about ripped my guts out. "I know about the secret stash, Elias, for her tuition. Man, I really thought I was being slick, building up a hidden, rainy day fund from all those back-breaking double shifts, so our kid wouldn't have to scrape by to get ahead. But Margaret, she always knew exactly how to read my blueprints. Her hand in mine felt like a busted little sparrow, all weak and shaking, getting ready to fly off somewhere I couldn't follow. Don't let her grow up looking at the streets the way we had to, Elias." She pushed the words out, her fingers locking down on mine with one last crazy burst of strength. "Give her a bright life. Swear it to me. Swear on your life she's going to be way bigger than we ever were." That heavy, gag-inducing smell of floor cleaner and cheap vending machine coffee felt like concrete in my chest. I stared down at the only woman who ever kept me straight since our raggedy days back in Bridgeport, way back when we were crammed in a dumpy one-bedroom joint with nothing but a pipe dream. I've got her back, Maggie. I swear it. I choked the words out, my throat tight with a kind of agony I couldn't even process yet. She's gonna have every single thing we missed out on. I'll be her damn armor. I'm making damn sure she never has to stare down an empty fridge or get crushed by bills she can't cover. Look, you never wash the stink of a hospital out of your nose once it turns into the dead end of a 30-year marathon. It reeks of ammonia and getting robbed of your future. I watched her lungs start to quit, catching on this rough, broken beat that ain't no emergency switch on earth could jumpstart. Out of my frantic need to let her die easy, I locked myself into a grind I couldn't even wrap my head around yet. To actually deliver on that shiny future for Beatrice, I knew I was going to have to hustle, eat up every back-to-back shift, jump on every middle-of-the-night disaster call, and milk every dangerous pay hour the union boys threw my way. It never clicked in my brain that by killing myself to pay for her spotlight, I was throwing away the very years I should have been standing right there watching her step into it. I signed up in blood to be the concrete slab she built her life on, forgetting that the foundation stays buried in the dirt just so the house can soak up the sunshine. That green line on the screen suddenly flatlined, dropping this one long, brutal beep that screamed my marriage was over, kicking off a nasty debt I've spent the last 5 years bleeding out on the clock to pay off. I just stood there gripping a hand that was already going ice cold, while that machine screamed out the exact second my whole damn universe got unplugged. The suffocating dead air inside that old Bridgeport house right after we buried her turned into this brutal, crushing pressure. A total blackout that no amount of grimy factory bulbs couldn't ever chase away that kind of dark. But 5 months after putting Margaret in the dirt, there I was, posted up on the flawless grass of Northwestern University. My calluses still reeked of factory copper, while my chest felt heavy with the blood money it took to buy the paper Beatrice was about to snatch up. The popping purple and white of those grad robes looked like straight-up royalty against Evanston's picture-perfect turf. I kept squirming, feeling the rigid neck of my one cheap suit jacket choking me out. It hit me right then Beatrice wasn't just grinding in the books. She was out here designing a whole new life, keeping this dude Julian a total ghost, stashing him away from our Bridgeport grit until she could flex on the flip side of that stage, with a degree acting like a bulletproof vest. I watched her strut across the platform in May 2021, head up, walking like she owned the joint. "We pulled it off, Maggie," I muttered to nobody. "She's on a level we couldn't even touch." My mind drifted back to those killer 16-hour graveyard shifts down at the substation and those double mortgage docs collecting dust on my kitchen table, the real currency paying for every single credit hour. While these other folks strutted around in custom-tailored threads bragging about their Hamptons getaways, my own hands felt like damn sandpaper, scarred up like a permanent brand. I busted my ass keeping her far away from my gritty reality of high-voltage lines. But honestly, doing that just turned me into an absolute outsider in her universe. "Pop, did you catch that? I finally made it out," Beatrice yelled out, shoving her way through the mob with this massive grin on her face. A shiny marketing degree. That piece of paper cost me the feeling in 3 of my fingers from a nasty electrical blowout back in the day. Worth the price of admission? I was desperately trying to convince myself it was. But right before I could grab my kid for a real bear hug, she spun around to face some dude who was hovering right over her shoulder. "Pop, this is Julian." And just like that, Julian Sinclair slid right out from behind. Her some guy pushing his late 30s, walking with that cocky swagger of a man who's never tasted the word no in his life. Listen, the guy's dark gray suit was straight off a runway, and his handshake? Total power trip garbage. Plus, that smirk on his face, Looked more like he was closing a hostile takeover than meeting his girl's old man. Julian runs things over at Sterling Tech. Pop. Made partner already, Beatrice bragged, her tone hitting this weird snobby note I'd never caught from her before. Good to meet you, Julian practically purred, sizing up my beat-up mug and those permanent grease burns that just never wash out of my nail beds. You definitely strike me as a guy who knows the ins and outs of a real-deal toolbox. Very authentic. You ever catch on to how these wealthy pricks toss around the word authentic when they really mean dirt poor? The class war started right then and there, buzzing between us like a bad transformer. He started running his mouth about Beatrice's future in Silicon Valley, treating my daughter like some shiny new startup he just bought out. Then he casually drops that his folks own a bunch of historic real estate downtown, those massive stone fortresses where guys like me only get to walk through the back alley freight doors. This punk wasn't sizing up a father-in-law. He was looking at the damn janitor in his own twisted fantasy. Julian flashed those ridiculously expensive bleached teeth and then seriously wiped his hand on this fancy silk pocket square, right after shaking my hand, acting like 30 years of honest sweat was some kind of disease. Fast forward, and Julian Sinclair is holding court at the head of this ritzy dining table like royalty, rambling on in some corporate alien tongue, just spitting a bunch of corporate garbage about scaling and tech disruption, making my blue-collar Bridgeport reality sound like ancient history. And as I sat there, still ghosting on the disrespect of that silk rag he used to scrub off my greeting, it hit me this little graduation bash wasn't dinner at all. It was an interrogation. Julian was pushing my buttons, trying to figure out if the local union electrician could survive a 5-star Chicago chop house without snapping, and making a scene that would humiliate his shiny new trophy girlfriend. The dim restaurant lighting bounced right off his flashy silver links when he leaned in, cutting through the background noise of clinking wine glasses and snobby whispers. The guy literally started lecturing Beatrice about angel investing and some post-work economy, basically a universe where computers print money instead of breaking a sweat. I tried to jump in, looking for any spark to connect with the vibe they had going. So I brought up my decades keeping the city's main power grid alive, breaking down the raw, dirty truth of how Chicago keeps the lights on. When the winter storms hit hard, Julian just threw me this smug, fake grin, the kind of look you give a toddler trying to explain how his little plastic toy actually runs. Those ancient infrastructure setups you deal with are cute. Elias, he muttered, swirling some $100 whiskey that just reeked of trust funds and old wood, like stepping right into a history exhibit from the Dark Ages. And Beatrice? She didn't even try to back her old man up. She just kept tapping away on her screen, eating up every toxic word he spilled. He has a point, Pop, she mumbled without even making eye contact. The world is running on cloud data now, not just copper lines. Seeing my kid try to force this corporate bro slang out of her mouth was like watching someone try to perform surgery with a crowbar. Awkward, fake, and honestly, hard to stomach. She was straight up deleting where she came from. The minute one of Julian's suit buddies strolled past the table, Beatrice stiffened up, copying his uptight posture like a damn parrot. Not a single peep about the South Side or the L trains that used to shake our apartment awake every morning. We were raised right off the parkway, she lied, putting on this ridiculous rich girl accent I had never heard in my life. So much nature around us. That hit me, like a gut punch. Watching her completely wipe out the gritty life we actually built together. I'm just scared you're forgetting who you really are, Bea. I choked out after his buddy walked away. You're sounding like a stranger. You ever feel the oxygen get sucked out of a space? Just because you're the only blue-collar guy who actually knows what keeps the damn roof from caving in? Julian and Beatrice just traded this loaded stare, freezing me out completely without dropping a single word. I wasn't her dad anymore. I was just a PR problem being swept under the basement. while the one percenters partied their brains out upstairs. That stiff, oversized cloth napkin they handed me felt like straight-up sandpaper on my rough, working man hands. When dinner finally wrapped, the loud, steady clack of Bia's expensive designer heels, echoing off the marble, sounded like a ticking time bomb. She yanked me over by the coat check, the heavy stench of premium, cigars choking up the room. "Pop, come on," she hissed, glancing nervously over at Julian. "Next time we kick it with his business boys, leave the beat-up Carhartt at home, all right?" Apparently, my blue-collar vibe was killing their buzz. She couldn't even look me dead in the mucket eyes while begging me to scrub my identity. She just fiddled with that fancy new pearl choker and trailed Julian out the door, ditching me with a massive check I was too broke to cover and a heavy quiet I couldn't shake. Those massive iron gates at the Sinclair mansion didn't just swing open. They straight up swallowed me whole, showing off a crushed stone driveway that ground under my beat-up Chevy's tires like the shattered bones of guys like me. Rolling up on that mega estate felt like trespassing in a whole different universe where my kind was banned for life. I was still dragging around the baggage from that downtown dinner, that crushing silence, and the tab that nearly bankrupted me. I slammed the rig into park, the busted engine sputtering out a loud middle finger to the dead quiet, rich kid streets of Lake Forest. I was supposed to be a guest for Sunday brunch, but I felt like a hired grease monkey showing up to patch a pipe in a freaking castle. 62-year-old Meredith Sinclair gripped her jewelry, acting all shocked, glaring at a smudge of dirt on her imported rug like it had personally insulted her ancestors. She greeted me at the front door with a fake grin that was picture perfect but totally ice cold, exactly like the fancy stone under my work boots. "Ah, you have to be Elias," she hummed, her tone dripping with that artificial, Splenda-type fake nice. "B mentioned you do a lot of dirty work." I felt her judging me like a live wire right to the chest. "I run the crew as a master electrician." "Lady," I fired back, keeping my tone dead steady and standing tall. "I'm the reason your lights turn on." It hit me real quick that B had done some heavy damage control before I even showed up. She definitely warned these snobs to never bring up our rough hood or how hard we hustled after my wife passed, basically scrubbing my whole life story before I even grabbed a chair at their bougie table. Meredith marched us out to this blindingly bright deck where every single silver fork shined like a polished weapon. That woman's voice was pure poison, smooth as silk, but built to choke you out cold before you even knew you couldn't breathe. She started running her mouth about the charm of blue-collar jobs, acting like busting my hump was just some cute weekend craft project instead of hardcore survival. Julian and B sat there like mutes. My own kid wouldn't look up from her fancy poached eggs, like that hollandaise sauce held the cheat code to her high society upgrade. When the old lady asked what I did for kicks, I brought up my garage and how I love fixing up busted old power gear, the real guts of Chicago. She let out this snobby little giggle that made my blood absolutely boil. "Such a cute little peasant hobby," she scoffed, taking a hit of her champagne. "So wild to meet a guy who still sweats for a paycheck. Honestly, it's like looking at a caveman. You ever been stuck at a dinner where the damn seasoning cost more than your first ride, but you're the only genuine human breathing in the room?" I squeezed that freezing, heavy-duty fork until my knuckles went pale. Ain't nothing primitive about the city's power. Grid, lady, I spat, my jaw locked. Without guys like me, this $1 million tech mansion is just a dark, worthless stack of bricks. Meredith didn't even flinch. She just cocked her head like she was staring at a zoo animal. Then she bragged about brainwashing B into liking richer things, basically trashing how I raised her like it was garbage, getting tossed out on the curb. She leaned back, blinding me with those massive rocks on her fingers, and dropped the hammer with this wicked, fake nice smile. "We definitely need to make sure the wedding doesn't look too Southside trash." I shot a look at my girl, but she kept her head down. Right then, I knew she was being stolen away by people playing a game I couldn't even afford to enter. Cut to me at the local bank window, breathing in cheap, drip coffee and burnt dust. Watching that teller slap down 80 fresh $100 bills, all I saw was the memory of my dead wife's wedding band and 3 brutal years of overtime. I swore to Maggie on her deathbed I'd protect our kid, but standing in that gritty lobby, I felt like a loser pawning the foundation of his home just to patch a busted roof. It was April, one of those nasty, freezing Chicago springs that just feels depressing. That wicked monster Meredith had drawn a line in the sand at that uppity brunch, making it crystal clear that anything less than high society perfection was a slap in the face to their precious family tree. And my girl actually came to me bawling because her rookie paycheck couldn't cover some designer dress. She was terrified Julian's crew would tear her apart, saying she'd look like straight trash standing next to them. So I dug deep into the safety net I busted my back to build. I cracked it wide open for her. "Get that gown, B," I muttered that night, sliding a blank envelope across the scuffed linoleum. "Cop the exact one your girl Meredith was hyping up." She snatched the cash, looking half saved and half guilty as hell, but she buried that shame real quick behind a fake, plastic grin. "Pops, you didn't have to go this hard," she breathed out, even as her knuckles turned white clutching the dough. "Julian's folks are stupid rich. I can't be out there looking like some Southside scrub. I made her lock it in the vault. I wasn't about to let that trust fund kid feel indebted to a blue-collar Sparky, and I damn sure didn't want his pity." A couple sunsets later, she hits me with some garbage story about losing the cash and maxing out her cards. My gut screamed liar until I clocked Julian down the road rocking a fresh piece on his wrist that ran exactly $8,000. You ever feel like you're footing the bill for your own damn funeral? $8,000. That is a massive load of stripped copper just to score a spot in the nosebleeds. June 2022 rolled in with a brutal heat wave, making the Chicago Botanic Garden look like a straight-up hallucination. Place was flooded with white, snobbery and uppity rich folks gossiping. My rented tux felt 10 years out of date, cheap fabric gnawing at my neck while I marched B down that carpet. She looked drop-dead gorgeous in that imported fabric, but the woman gripping my arm felt like a total stranger. The second the preacher said, "Amen," I got banished. "Table 14, boss." Some snot-nosed kid in an uptight vest directed me, waving me over to a dead zone trapped behind a massive stone column right next to the swinging kitchen doors. "Man, I can't even spot my kid from this corner," I grumbled, but the punk had already bounced. I parked myself on the chair while commercial sinks screamed and rattled through the drywall. The sickening perfume of 5,000 roses going to war with bleach and suds. Surrounded by million-dollar blooms, I was just the dirt. Handed my little girl away, then turned into straight invisible air. I glanced down at the fancy-ass itinerary, sitting by my plate, and felt a block of ice hit my stomach. My name got completely scrubbed. Not a single shout-out to the old man who raised her. Just some cookie-cutter garbage blessing the bride's folks for showing up. Kept my seat there, breathing in a mix of gourmet fish and rotting garbage bags. Watched that punk Julian toast his champagne to a bloodline that clearly cut out the guy who literally bought the threads on her back. The kid I raised, the tomboy who used to toss me, ratchets back in the Bridgeport shop and didn't give a damn about motor oil on her hands, was getting buried under pounds of high-end fabric and a bougie accent she totally faked. I posted up by the service entrance, the racket from those heavy-duty scrubbers slapping a beat that mocked the snobby chatter echoing in the main hall. Julian's old man took the mic, his booming rich guy tone blasting through the amps as he hyped up B's classiness and how smoothly she slid into their blue blood dynasty. The dude was talking like she got pushed out in some Lake Forest mansion, acting like I didn't. Hustled to buy her first kicks and drop thousands on the dress she was parading around in. Soon as the DJ hyped up the father-daughter dance, a massive hit of old-school pride hit my chest, only to get instantly killed by the sterile, fake, vibe of that massive greenhouse. I grabbed her hand, but she was stiff and freezing, completely missing the heartbeat of the little girl who used to pass out on my neck when I came off a double. Paparazzi-level flashbulbs popped off everywhere, blinding me into a messed-up fog, while some corny cover band blasted noise that murdered any shot at a legit heart-to-heart. I closed the gap, digging for just one crack in her rich girl disguise. "Your mom would have flipped for these flowers, kid," I mumbled, praying Margaret's ghost would knock some sense into her. She shot me a look, but her pupils were already bouncing back to her new husband and his stuck-up folks, begging for a thumbs up. "Chill out, Pops, seriously," she hissed, sounding like a damn robot. "Julian's backers are staring. We gotta play. Up the image. We're repping the Sinclair brand tonight." While we stepped, she pulled me in tight, but not out of love. She confessed she didn't actually lose my life savings. She passed my stack straight to her man, letting him play the hero who bought the dress, just so his snobby parents would think he was holding her down. 30 years of busting my ass as her dad, wiped out for a 3-minute shuffle and a weak chin-up from a son-in-law who couldn't even tell you my middle name. I felt like a damn janitor crashing my own kid's world. An obsolete machine getting junked for the newer upgrade. The heavy, suffocating reek of overpriced booze and drenched in cologne suits started crushing my lungs, making the oxygen feel as fake as Julian's vows. I scoped out the 1%ers gliding around with that arrogant swagger I'd never pull off, chuckling in a dialect I was too broke to understand. Hit me right then. Every step she took into this Sinclair fantasy meant burying the guy who broke his back to build her up. I couldn't stick around for them to slice the cake. I couldn't watch them raise their glasses to a tomorrow that completely locked me out. I clocked her by the VIP section, her face already a stressed-out, plastic mask of high society burnout. "I'm gonna bounce, B," I mumbled, feeling like I was throwing in the towel. "I think I'm done here." She didn't even bat an eye. "All right, cool." She brushed me off, her eyes already scanning the crowd. "Julian's chauffeur can grab you a ride. We're tied up with the firm's heavy hitters. How are you supposed to care for somebody who's working overtime to kill off every piece of you they used to know?" I stepped out into the freezing night breeze, making a beeline for the lot. My stomach dropped out completely when I spotted it by the trash bins. That custom wooden trunk I busted my knuckles building for her wedding was dumped in the garbage just because it clashed with their bougie, modern art aesthetic. I hit the gas and peeled out. The sight of my blood, sweat, and tears rotting in the alley burned into my brain. That's when I knew my kid didn't just relocate. She flat out locked me out of her universe. Down in Bridgeport, quiet ain't just empty air. It's this suffocating weight that camps out in a crib that used to smell like Maggie's dinners and ring out with Bia's giggles. Every tick of the clock bounced down the bare hall, sounding like my whole life was slowly bleeding out onto the floorboards. I dragged myself back from that wedding, feeling like a dude who just got amputated from his own flesh and blood. Word on the street eventually reached me that B and her boy threw a massive, high-roller bash for their new top-floor condo 6 months back. I was the only blood relative left totally in the dark. That slap in the face burned. Way worse than grabbing a live wire. Between 2022 and 2024, my kids' check-ins went from a weekly habit to a forced monthly chore, and finally down to totally random, fake nice text messages. I was stuck in a brutal cycle, just glaring at the glowing screen in my pitch-black kitchen. I'd shoot over something basic, like "Yo Bea, just seeing what's good. Heard a storm's rolling your way, love pops." I'd sit there watching the read receipt hit, but if she even bothered hitting me back, it was a cold, swamped, "Dad, catch you later." I already knew Julian built this freeze-out, but Beatrice was the one locking the deadbolt. My kids' loyalty turned into a busted street lamp blocks away. You know it's plugged in, but it ain't throwing enough heat to keep the shadows out. My spot started smelling like dead air, dusty timber, and the harsh pumice soap I used to strip the grime off my hands. I kept grinding out shifts at the power plant on autopilot, but that old hustle I had for keeping the grid running got swapped out for a suffocating type of loneliness. Turkey Day 2024 rolled up, and for the panned, first time ever, my phone was a ghost town. Not even a fake excuse about hitting the in-laws' vacation mansion. Running on nothing but stubborn, sad routine, I grabbed a solo turkey cut at the corner store. The scent of it cooking in that massive oven felt like a judge slapping me with a life sentence of being alone. I threw down a plate for Maggie's picture, the cheap metal frame grabbing that weak winter sunlight, and just stared a hole through the empty seat where Bea used to kick it. Ever throw down on a whole feast just to prove to the drywall that you ain't dead yet? It's a sad show for a room full of ghosts. I pulled out my cell and caught the Sinclair crew flexing on the feed. They were out in Lake Forest, posted up at some five-star setup that looked straight out of a magazine, cracking up with a bunch of trust fund snobs. I had been totally cut out of the script, just a dirty, rough draft they didn't want the world to see. "Happy holidays, Maggie," I rasped to the empty drywall. "She's just grinding at the firm this season." That lie tasted like straight-up dirt in my mouth. About a week later, some heavy, high-end stationery drops in my mailbox. I thumbed that rich, textured paper, the exact kind of bougie trash Julian was obsessed with. Turned out to be a basic, mass-printed holiday flex from the Sinclair compound. Not a single handwritten word. Just a glossy studio shot of the fam. But my lungs locked up when I clocked the fancy sign-off at the bottom. First time seeing the damage in black and white. Beatrice Sinclair. She literally wiped out the Thorne name. Wiped my last name clean off her radar. I just stood there, glaring at that bougie, gold-stamped piece of heavy cardstock, finally getting that my own kid didn't just relocate to some ritzy zip code up the coast. She flat out ghosted the dude who broke his back, paving her way. Fresh cedar dust is basically the only scent keeping me sane these days. So, I dragged myself downstairs for 60 straight nights, my hands numb from the bay, power tools, hustling to build a reality where my little granddaughter might actually know who her grandpa is. Down, in my dead quiet Bridgeport, the basement, the screaming pitch of that rotary sander was the only thing loud enough to block out the miserable quiet of a turkey dinner I had to eat solo. I had already swallowed the bitter pill of that fancy invite and her dropping my surname. But I'll be damned if I fade into a total myth to little Clara. Word on the street was her slick husband. Julian dropped $2,000 on some hyped-up, mass-produced plastic mansion for her. Big day. A soulless piece of garbage cranked out on an assembly line just because it had some high-end label slapped on the packaging. I couldn't care less, man. I was out here hand-carving some real family history. I sweated bullets putting together this killer old-school Victorian setup, bleeding all that raw heartache right into those custom window frames and microscopic copper wires. I took these beat-up master electrician hands and rigged up a killer custom grid, making sure every single microscopic room lit up with this dope, warm amber vibe from those tiny wheat bulbs. I swear I could picture my granddaughter's face rocking her grandma Margaret's eyes the second she hit that little main breaker, stashed dead under the front porch. "Ain't it just like the real deal, Maggie?" I breathed out, my calloused fingers brushing over the slick, custom-painted railing. The kid is gonna lose her mind when that porch light sparks up. Look, a little wooden house needs a rock-solid concrete base. Turns out, a family ain't built the same way. Not when you're flush with cash and can just cop a fresh start every single season. By June 2025, the heavy, honest stench of raw cedar and linseed oil was basically cooked into my pores, like a street metal, for being a damn good grandfather. I finally grabbed the kitchen receiver to lock down the drop-off for Clara's 4th birthday bash. Beatrice picked up sounding straight up icy and locked in, like some corporate shark reciting a PR statement. "Pops, we already got a high-end coordinator out here in Lake Forest," she dropped, her vibe as dead and bleached as an ER waiting room. The whole thing is strictly Nordic minimalist. We flew in a shooter all the way from New York to lock down the aesthetic. Curated? B, come on. I choked out, my throat tight. It's a little girl's house. I did the electric myself. I busted my back for months on the woodwork. It's for my blood. She let out this heavy sigh, and the dead air that hit the line right after felt like a straight punch to the gut. It's way too Southside Bridgeport, Dad. It clashes with the vibe. Don't make this a whole thing. We ain't having some clunky, homemade wood project junking up the background of our high-end shots. It's gonna throw off Julian's corporate partners to see you rolling up looking, well, like you. Since when did my own flesh and blood start treating her old man like a dirty stain? On her glossy magazine life? That backstab cut way deeper than just a trashed present. While we just sat there breathing into the receivers, Beatrice let it slip that she'd been telling my granddaughter I was living overseas. My own kid was literally ghosting me out of the little girl's head just to keep her high society rep spotless. I was just some ghetto phantom to her. A piece of blue-collar dirt she was, dying to sweep out of her shiny new suburban mansion. I just stood there, in the pitch-black basement, after the line went dead, watching those mini house lights burning like a sick joke about the family I just lost. That hardcore cedar smell suddenly reeked like a fresh, graveyard arrangement. Just ship the damn thing, Dad. Her last sentence kept bouncing off the concrete walls. We'll toss it up in the crawl space for down the road. I put a trembling hand on that tiny shingled roof, knowing damn well that down the road meant never. The brutal rip of thick industrial tape screeching across a cardboard crate felt like I was taping my own chest shut for good. I posted up in the shadows of my underground shop. The cozy amber heat coming from those little rooms died out, switch by switch, while I boxed away my life's work from the light of day. Right as I shoved the last sheet of plastic padding around those custom 9 rooftops, my thumb caught a hard edge hiding in the timber. It was a throwback Polaroid of Maggie cradling a newborn Beatrice, her eyes shining with that desperate crazy hope only rookies and master craftsmen can ever really feel. I'd tucked it deep inside, the house's fake crawl space way back, a low-key treasure for my granddaughter to dig up down the line. Now, it was just an SOS chucked into a void of sterile white yuppie garbage that wanted me erased from the map. I locked down the top flaps, the harsh, chalky stink of cheap glue and corrugated paper burning my nostrils. I lugged that dead weight out to the pickup, my blown-out knees, screaming the whole way as I hauled my trashed heart straight to the Southside post office. The inside was a chaotic buzz of bad lighting and the toxic reek of copy machines. I slammed the crate down onto the heavy-duty scale, the steel whining under. 60 straight nights of blood and sweat. Needs handle with care? The counter girl asked, floating a finger over a spool of neon caution tape. You have no idea, I muttered. I just stood there as she smacked the barcode against the side, that string of digits, turning into the absolute last thread connecting me to my bloodline. What's the exact mass of a man once he's been stripped down? To 10 digits and some brown packaging? Felt like I was paying freight to ship my actual soul to an address that didn't take deliveries from street-level guys like me. I dropped the cash for the postage, glaring at the sterile neon slip like it was a damn court order banning me from the family. I cruised back to the crib, the dead quiet in the driveway hitting just as hard as the empty crater down in my shop. I blew through the next couple of days walking like a straight-up zombie, my cell, glued to my palm 24/7. I kept picturing my little girl finding those hidden circuits, popping that mini breaker, or maybe even crossing paths with the snapshot of the grandma she'd never get to hug. I held out for a blurry clip, a quick ring, or literally just one halfway decent text from Beatrice, giving a nod to the fact that her old man bled for this thing. But nah. The only noise in my kitchen was that busted wall clock ticking away, basically laughing at how pathetic I was. Then, out of nowhere, the DOFfice alert popped up, dropped off, inked, tossed in the trash. The 3 steps to watching your bloodline flatline. I was just burning a hole through my phone screen when a text finally slid in from Beatrice. Delivery. Secured. Appreciate it. The message was so utterly dead inside, so completely robotic and fake, it practically froze the whole damn room. I clicked over to the contact info, and this sick, familiar sinking feeling hit my gut. My own flesh and blood didn't even bother typing that out. It had the little digital watermark from her fancy automated virtual secretary bot. My kid couldn't even spare 3 lousy seconds to respect the absolute masterpiece I bled over for her. Little girl. I just glared at that read receipt, trying to figure out exactly when giving a damn turned into a business deal, stamped, processed, and shoved in a drawer like nothing. Somebody banging on my front door at 10 at night usually means someone on the block blew a fuse again. But the lady getting drenched on my stoop wasn't from the neighborhood. It was the exact same kid who hadn't dialed my number for half a year. I'd literally just killed an hour glaring at my online banking app, that stupid startup chime ringing in my head while I watched my sad little pension balance fading out like a cigarette butt. Catching Beatrice out there, her designer jacket totally waterlogged and her face looking like a cornered animal. All my tired, bitter anger just vanished into pure dad survival mode. She wasn't slumming it down in Bridgeport to catch up. She rolled up because Julian's snobby trust fund folks finally called his bluff on his fake tech hustle and cut his pampered ass completely off. I was the bottom of the barrel backup plan. Beatrice stepped into my kitchen, tracking in the stench of soaked cashmere and high-end fragrance, choking up my tiny spot. She looked small, man, trembling under my cheap ceiling bulbs that threw dark, messed-up shadows right over my beat-up checkbook. She immediately started running her mouth about Julian's killer new app, some exclusive pre-launch hustle that just needed one more cash drop to make them filthy rich. She couldn't even look her dead mother Margaret in the eye, totally ignoring the framed picture on the shelf. But she sure as hell weaponized all that sweet talk about protecting the family and honoring our roots to hook me. "Pop, Julian is right at the finish line," she mumbled, practically crying. "This is the big score. It guarantees we won't ever sweat the bills again. B, I'm 60 years old," I fired back, my chest heavy with the brutal reality of 30 years breaking my back on sketchy scaffolding and freezing in underground utility trenches. That nest egg is the literal blood, sweat, and tears of my entire existence. It's my finish line, kiddo. I felt like a power grid shorting out in a hurricane, flaring up wild and hot. And I knew damn well that once I burned this last fuse, I was going to be left as nothing but scrap metal. But then, Beatrice just lost it. She was bawling, and it was real enough to override any street smarts I had left. She swore Julian's investors were leaning hard on him, that their whole flashy, upscale lifestyle was about to get repoed and burned to the ground. Suddenly I'm staring at the little girl who used to grab my jeans when the lightning hit, and I was choking. On the vow I made to Margaret on her deathbed to never let our kid freeze out there, I hustled myself into believing this was my last real shot to step up and be a heavy hitter she needed. What the hell would you do? Hand over your only parachute to a kid who only realizes you're breathing when the rent is past due? My hands were basically vibrating as I put ink on that line. The storm was just thrashing the way. Glass, like a blaring siren, I actively tuned out. I stroked a check for $50,000 every single dime I hoarded for the day my joints finally blew out. "You'll get every penny back before the holidays, Pop," she swore, gripping that slip of paper for dear life. "Forget about the extra cut, B," I muttered, feeling this dead, empty space caving in my chest. "Just show your face around here sometime." The second she bolted for the exit, she slipped up and dropped her cell on my kitchen counter for a hot second to grab her umbrella. The lock screen flashed bright, and I caught the headline dead on. It was an incoming from Julian. Did the old fool cough it up? Gotta lock in that country club initiation fee by Monday. The ink on that? The dotted line hadn't even dried before. That scumbag's message proved I wasn't bailing out my kid's future. I was getting played for a fool. Future. I literally bankrolled that punk's ego. When my girl Beatrice slammed that front door, walking out with every dime I'd ever saved, It sounded like a jail cell slamming shut on my life. Man, there's a totally different kind of freeze that gets all the way down into your marrow. It hits you the second you figure out. The kid you'd take a bullet for is out there blowing your blood, sweat, and tears on flashy garbage that doesn't mean a thing. I was posted up at my kitchen table, catching that nasty, rusty smell of a crib that's freezing cold. I kept the heat practically off, just trying to stretch whatever pennies I had left to my name. Right in front of me was a crazy mountain of bills, and those bright red past due warnings staring through the plastic windows looked like evil little eyes judging me. I kept waking up my screen, praying my daughter would text saying she messed up and was bringing it back. Instead, my phone hit me with that annoying fake ping from some app, totally wrecking the quiet. The feed shoved some random post in my face that made my guts hit the floor. Right there was her man, Julian, cheesing like a damn shark leaning up against a slick, metallic blue Porsche Taycan. Dude actually wrote, "Success is a choice," underneath it. But I wasn't even looking at the ride. I clocked where they were parked right outside this bougie private country club out in Lake Forest, a joint that charges exactly 50 grand just to walk through the door. That was the seed money Beatrice swore up and down was for his tech startup. $50,000, I muttered to the dead air, my throat totally choking up. That's 200 months of rent, Margaret, blown on a set of wheels and a VIP list. Look, any real wire puller knows exactly when a breaker is about to pop. I was sitting there watching my entire existence catch fire, and my own flesh and blood was the one holding the damn matches. My hands were shaking so bad when I tapped her name. The glass was burning up against my ear while I waded through the rings, my chest pounding like a jackhammer. When she finally picked up, she already had that nasty edge to her tone, throwing up this brick wall that I had no clue how to knock down. "Pops, I'm literally slammed in a meeting right now," she snapped, even though I could hear the highway wind blasting through her open window. "B, I saw the whip," I told her, fighting like hell to keep it together. "I'm staring at a final eviction warning from my landlord. I just need a tiny piece of that cash back. 2 grand so the electric company doesn't cut me off and my gear stays out of the pawn shop." Man, the way she flipped it on me was pure evil. She started coming at me, saying I was creeping on her socials like some psycho stalker, spitting some nonsense about how the Porsche was a strict business expense to make her guy look like a boss for his backers. "Dad, you gotta stop acting so broke and petty," she barked. "My man is moving in circles you could never even wrap your head around. We'll square up when the company goes public. If you actually cared about me, you wouldn't be sweating me over family money, like some shady repo man. Since when does looking out for your own turn into a shakedown for affection that was totally fake from the jump?" It hit me right then. Handing over my savings didn't set her up for life. It just paid her to ghost me. She straight up told me her husband told her to cut me off. Word was, me begging for my own money back was ruining his vibe for their big launch. Then she just clicked over. That dead silence on the line was just a flat, soulless hum that perfectly matched my zeroed-out bank statement, smacking me with the cold, hard facts. I wasn't her old man anymore. I was just a drained battery they tossed out. I just zoned out at the black screen, listening to the kitchen sink dripping away, because I didn't have the cash for a plumber. The invite was this crazy, thick, off-white paper that felt way too fancy for a relationship that had already been torched to the ground. I was just standing there in my kitchen, the echo of that last blow-up with B still messing with my head. 60 days of dead air. 2 solid months of watching my accounts bleed dry while her guy's timeline was lit up with the shiny neon flecks of his new whip. I was finally at a place where I accepted I wasn't her dad anymore, just some garbage they used up and kicked to the curb. Then this delivery guy rolls up. Not your regular mailman, either. Dude was rocking a tailored suit and pulling up in a ride that was way too flashy for my gritty Bridgeport block. I figured out they didn't mail it because my kid was dead set on hiding her new spot from me treating the guy who put clothes on her back like a threat. I ripped into that, heavy-duty envelope, the tearing sound echoing in the dead quiet like someone gasping for air. Tossed inside was a VIP lanyard for the ribbon cutting at the apex, that billion-dollar smart tower her husband had been talking up forever. A handwritten slip dropped out, smelling all chemical and fake. Time to let the drama go. Pops, I said out loud, looking for any trace of my real kid in that perfectly fake corporate handwriting. Julian really needs you in the building to celebrate our win. I kept reading that nonsense over and over, my beat-up, working-class hands feeling up that fancy, slick paper. Look, hope is a sketchy fuse to spark. You keep lighting it, thinking it'll keep you warm, but you just end up holding the C4 when the timer hits 0. I stared at that stack of collection notices, cluttering up the counter, then back down at that flashy gold logo for the apex shining in the crappy kitchen light. Figured maybe her guys. Making it big meant finally pulling up a chair at the family dinner again, or at least bagging the $50,000 needed to keep a roof over my head. Why the hell does a dad's heart always leave the porch light on for the kid who keeps robbing him blind? I made up my mind. Right, then and there to roll the dice, scrape together my absolute last few bucks for a decent fade, and to get my best white button-down dry cleaned. I looked at this fancy gala as my make-or-break shot to show the Sinclair crew I wasn't just dead weight. I looked over at Margaret's picture in that beat-up silver frame, the only piece of sunshine left in this dump. Just one last score, Margaret. I swore to her out loud. Just one more night to prove I'm the rock holding this family together, not the dead weight drowning everybody. I'm gonna fix this mess. Before the holidays hit, I felt this crazy mix of raw nerves and street hustle. Convinced myself that if I just dressed like a boss, they'd finally see the real man I used to be. But flipping the invite over, I caught this tiny print on the back that hit me like a splash of ice water. Black tie mandatory, 0 exceptions. That little text was a low-key warning about the cutthroat. They didn't want the real me. They wanted a well-dressed prop. That piece of paper wasn't a family invite. It was a straight-up court order for a circus act, where the dress code was a heavy choke collar. I jammed the fancy cardstock into my shirt pocket, completely clueless that trying to squash our old beef was actually me walking blindfolded straight into an ambush. There was 0 fence mending happening here. They were just baiting me out over the ledge so they could sip champagne on the 85th floor while I crashed and burned. The 5th of December kicked off with skies looking like a busted black and blue motherboard. Still, posted up in my cramped Bridgeport kitchen, I was doing my absolute best to jumpstart whatever heartbeat I had left. I reached up and grabbed this beat-up, dark blue box from the top closet shelf. It held the silk tie Maggie copped for our 30th anniversary. Popped the lid open, and this tiny, faded piece of paper drifted out. A quick note from my late wife I somehow managed to miss for years. It said, "I am incredibly proud of your rough, working hands, Elias," penned in her classic, beautiful handwriting. Man, that punched the air right out of my lungs. My hands were literally trembling as I grabbed the fabric. But reading her words, right then and there, it felt like jumping a dead car battery. I shoved the invite deep into my sharpest button-down, and for a split second, the ambush I was sweating didn't feel like a guaranteed slaughter. Around 9 in the morning, I posted up at Tony's spot, a straight-up fossil from the old block. The heavy stench of bay, rum, cheap aftershave, and baby powder somehow chilled out my racing pulse. Tony, a dude who watched my fade go from pitch black to a busted ash gray, just mumbled some random tune while buzzing the back of my neck. "Got heavy plans today. Elias?" he barked, manhandling my chin with a grip that hadn't changed in decades. "Ain't seen you request the straight blade since you tied the knot." I stared hard at the glass in front of me, watching the crisp, tight edges of a real edge-up finally show through. "It's my kid's big showcase, T," I told him, scraping deep to find the guy Maggie used to ride for. buried under all this exhausted baggage. Gotta look like I run the room. Tony just threw me a quiet, solid look of respect. First time in 3 solid years I could actually hold my own gaze in the mirror. Any street-smart Sparky will tell you, one busted wire drops the entire block. I made damn sure my kicks were polished and my knot was dead center. Still, my gut was screaming that the walls were already catching fire. Back at the crib, the steady, spitting from the hot iron was the only sound bouncing around my hollow place. I worked the fabric with the same obsessive grind I used on high-voltage grids, pressing out every single wrinkle until that shirt was as sharp as the bogus invite sitting on the counter. The smell of burning starch hit me, taking me straight back to church Sundays from way back. While I started looping that dark blue silk around my neck, I shot a look at Maggie's picture on the nightstand. Look at your boy, Maggie. Swagged out and finally stepping up to be a real pops again. I stood up straight, brushing off the killer. Joint pain in my knees, locking down the tie knot with my beat-up, calloused fingers. Honestly, how many times can a guy buff up his ego before the shine completely rubs off? Felt exactly like suiting up for a street fight the refs already rigged against me. But the fire in my chest was as rock solid as a grounded live wire. Fired up my old rusted-out pickup, checked the dash, and my stomach dropped running purely on fumes. Zero chance I'd survive the round trip to Lake Forest. Swung by the corner pump, staring hard as the meter chewed through every single emergency dollar I had left to my name. It wiped me out, completely zero. Paper left in my wallet. A massive roll of the dice for a night-selling fake piece with absolutely no safety net. Cut the kitchen. Bulbs and bolted the deadbolt. That heavy envelope pressed right against my heart like Kevlar. Totally blind to the fact that the actual storm brewing ahead was the smallest of my problems. Snow was absolutely dumping by the time I merged onto Lakeshore Drive, flakes, blurring my high beams like a busted analog television. I cruised toward the apex tower, this massive, arrogant middle finger of glass, and steel just ripping through the blizzard. I kept feeling Maggie's hidden letter resting in my jacket, holding my pride down as I navigated my junkyard rig into the massive concrete throat of the underground structure. The wild, frantic slapping of meat against heavy glass bounced through the dead quiet of level P3. That exact noise froze my blood before I even killed the ignition. Glanced up and caught how the high-tech security lenses down here were completely twisted away from the back wall, a highly engineered blind spot in a billionaire's playground. I jumped out the cab. The reek of wet cement and choking exhaust smacked me in the face, barely 20 feet off. A souped-up Tesla Model X was chilling under blown-out neon bulbs. Its flashy wing doors jammed halfway open, looking exactly like a crippled vulture. Inside was Leonora Vance, the 78-year-old ruthless boss of Vance Holdings, trapped and throwing a complete panic, fit behind the heavy tint. Her expensive silver hair was completely thrashed, and those cold blue eyes were blown wide with the raw fear of a cornered rat. I clocked her instantly from the heavy business rags. This was the exact shark who practically owned half of the high-rise world. But right now, this VIP was scratching like a trapped rat inside a vacuum-sealed steel coffin. "Yo, can you hear me?" The thick glass ate her screams. "The manual latch is completely shot, lady. Just chill out," I hollered, slamming my hands flat against that freezing, matte black paint job. "Take it slow with the breathing. I work with wires for a living. I'll bust you out of there." I could literally feel the dead cooling fans fighting to kick over like a weak, dying heartbeat. A $1 billion high-rise, $100,000 whip. And here she was, about to suffocate over a broken 50-cent piece of plastic. I felt up the outside sensors and the charging port, but they were completely bricked. Then that nasty burnt plastic smell of fried wires started creeping out from under the chassis. It was some sick joke. But I didn't have a second to think about how this fancy building's power grid was probably trapping the car's computer in a total death spiral. The lady's heavy breathing was clouding up the bulletproof window, and she was thrashing around like crazy. The air's gone. I'm choking. Out here! She choked out, staring at me with pure animal panic in her eyes. Hey! Eyes on me! I barked, using that same bossy tone I use when rookies mess around with live wires on the street. Ignore the damn doors. Focus on my face. I am not walking away until I pop this lock. You ever watch someone's soul leave their body when they figure out an algorithm gets to choose if they breathe or choke? All her high society class was melting down into straight-up survival mode as she started, taking those shallow, ragged breaths. Shaking like a leaf, she managed to spit out that she was the VIP for the big blowout upstairs and pulled a late-show stunt just to see if their security was legit. She swore Julian was plotting to use her no-show to steal the throne, thinking she just blew him off. I stared down at my crisp, perfectly pressed white cuffs and then glanced back at the nasty black hydraulic sludge bleeding out from underneath the ride. I had exactly 10 minutes to play the big shot, or less than 1 minute to play the hero. The electronic latches were totally ghosting me, and the lady trapped inside was going off the deep end, full-blown hyperventilating while banging her gray head against the window over and over. I stopped giving a damn about the dry cleaning tag or the perfect knot in Margaret's favorite silk tie, dropping straight down into that slick, nasty puddle of car grease. All I cared about was the clock ticking on her oxygen supply. That fresh white cotton of my dress shirt was the first casualty, drinking up that freezing, nasty sludge off the concrete floor, belly crawling like a grunt under the electric ride's underbelly. My tailored jacket scraped against the rough pavement. My bare hands, calloused from years working blind inside. A million cramped addicts blindly felt around for the backup release wire. The damn rig was stuck fast, locked down by some weird power spike that broke all the rules of physics. And then I clocked it. A dirty little signal jammer shoved way back inside the piece. Wheel well, flashing this evil little red dot. This wasn't bad luck. It was a straight-up hit. Somebody needed this lady, taken out for good in the dark corners of level P3. I couldn't waste time analyzing how messed up it was. Come on, almost there, I groaned, my shoulders burning as I fought the stiff metal. Give it up, you piece of junk. I yanked that manual override wire with everything I had left in the tank. Hot grease blasted out like a snake hissing, painting my face and chest with burning, nasty sludge. I didn't even blink. Then came this loud, chunky clack as the heavy doors finally let go, a noise that felt like a 100-pound dumbbell dropping off my chest. Pop. Whoosh. The heavy door squeaked up, saved a heartbeat, but completely trashed the wardrobe. Leonora Vance tumbled out onto the pavement, sucking down that nasty exhaust-filled parking lot air like it was a fresh breeze off the Rockies. Her white hair was a crazy mess framing her ghost-white face. I slid my way out from under the rig, looking like I just crawled out of a blown-up engine room. I propped her up against a cement pole, the giant grease stain, ruining my chest, acting like a battle scar she couldn't even process. Slumped against the concrete, her piercing blue eyes locked, right onto me, shaking but staring hard. Man, I don't even know how to repay you. She, gasping for air. You got no idea who you're dealing with. Look, lady, I gotta bounce. I cut her off, checking my wrist as pure panic set in. My chest felt like it was going to explode, beating out a crazy rhythm. My little girl is stuck up on the 85th floor. I'm pushing time as it is. Hey, take a breath, she replied, digging into her designer purse and shoving this thick, fuzzy piece of cardstock right into my grimy hand. I didn't even bother checking what it was. All I cared about was the clock running out on my kid. I bolted for the lifts like a dude dodging a live wire. I smashed that up button with fingers caked in. Pure grime. That thick stink of burnt engine oil and concrete dust trailed right behind me like a shadow. I was a total wreck, of stiff collar and black sludge, feeling that nasty wet grease seeping right through my tee onto my chest. Right when those doors started shutting, I gave the paper a quick look. No name printed on it, just a shiny gold bird rising from ashes and a direct phone number. Catching a glimpse of my busted-up reflection in the polished steel, my gut dropped. I definitely didn't look like some A-list hotshot. I was giving off the exact blue-collar phantom vibe Julian kept warning me to bury. Flipping from hometown hero to total outcast took 0 seconds flat. I rolled up 20 minutes behind schedule, completely caked in engine grime, and about to march straight into the slaughterhouse, rocking nothing but a busted necktie and some stranger's business card. That elevator ding hit my ears like a death sentence falling, and as those heavy brushed steel doors peeled open, the 85th floor of the apex smacked me with a brick wall of dead silence and the reek of $500 an ounce cologne. I caught a flash of myself in the chrome, right before it opened wide, and my gut just bottomed out. I sure as hell didn't look like any A-lister. I was the exact blue-collar scrub Julian swore I'd end up acting like. I stepped out into that wide-open penthouse space, my busted, sludgy face and soaked. Flannel straight up warring with the cold, rich kid aesthetic of this smart tower. Every heavy boot I dropped on that bright, stupidly pristine marble seemed to echo and highlight the filthy crud tracking off my soles. All these big shots decked out in custom-tailored suits and diamond-studded dresses physically backed up when I walked by, their small talk dropping dead, right in their throats. The snarky little whispers trailing me started slicing through the fancy champagne toasts like broken bottles. Who let the street rat in? Some suit muttered under his breath. Somebody get the bouncers up here before he trashes the place. I was scanning the crowd like crazy, trying to spot Beatrice, my hands shaking like a leaf while I tried scrubbing. This heavy-duty car, grease off my skin. Using some flimsy bar napkin, I swiped from a waiter, which only made the grime rub deeper into my pores. I was fighting to hold on to that hyped-up hero feeling I had right after, pulling that lady out of the wreckage downstairs. But under the blinding glare of 1,000 overhead lights, I was nothing but trash ruining their $1,000,000 vibe. Hey, I'm on the list. I'm the host's dad. I stuttered out defensively as this beefy rent-a-cop started zeroing in on my location. The backstab hit way deeper when it dawned on me that Beatrice had already fed the profession. VIP crew some bull story about her old man being too sick to show, which made my trashed look come off like a crazy scam she'd have to scramble to fix. 85 stories high. I was supposed to be king of the hill tonight. Instead, I felt like a damn rat caught in the headlights. Beatrice finally locked eyes with me from the bar, and she went ghost white, flipping from boss lady confidence to straight-up panic mode in a split second. She bolted over, her crazy high heels, stomping out a chaotic beat on the tile. She didn't bother asking if I was breathing or why I looked like I'd been dragged through the mud. Nah, she just clamped onto my arm like a pair of pliers, her fake nails stabbing right into my skin through the ripped-up threads of my button-down. "Pop, what the hell did you do?" She spit out in this hyper-stressed, low-key scream while shoving her body between me and a circle of slick-haired hedge fund guys. "You literally look like you crawled out of a sewer." B. Listen, there was a smash-up in the parking deck. I tried laying it out, my chest aching worse with every syllable. I pulled a girl out. She got pinned down. "I don't give a damn about the parking lot," she barked back, her eyes bugging out looking for Julian. "You're blowing my whole setup. Get in. The utility closet right now? You ever catch your own kid staring at you like you're just some filthy mistake they gotta scrub clean?" It hit me right then. She was way more terrified of how Julian would react than giving a damn about whether I was bleeding or humiliated. I just let her shove me into the dark hallway until the backroom door busted wide open, and I was dead, locked staring at Julian and the exact circle of heavy hitters I was supposed to be schmoozing. Julian didn't just glance my way. He sized me up and tore me down, his cold eyes taking in my greasy cuffs like a ruthless shark crunching the exact dollar amount my pathetic vibe was going to cost his stock shares. My own flesh and blood had basically thrown me into the back alley, just to land me dead center in a firing squad of big money. James Sterling, the absolute titan running Sterling. Tech. Froze with his expensive bubbly halfway to his mouth, his old money eyebrows pinching together in total boardroom disgust. Right beside him, Robert Sterling, the money guy, pushed up his slick wire frames, his gaze bouncing from Julian to my dirty boots like he was running a live fraud check. Beatrice, sweetheart, is this the heavy-hitting veteran consultant you pitched us? Julian mocked, cranking up the volume so all the suits could hear. Dude looks more like a maintenance guy who got stuck in the air ducts. Beatrice froze up like a statue, her expensive silk outfit glowing under the overhead fixtures, while she fished for some garbage excuse she wouldn't choke on. Julian, look, he's my dad, she started. But Julian shut her down with a brutal flick of his wrist. He's a walking red flag, B. Look at the grime on this guy. It's straight up barbaric. He leaned forward then, this sick, twisted light sparking in his eyes. He actually spun it to the bigwigs that I was some charity case mascot, the poster boy for the firm's shiny new inner-city outreach hustle. I was the single live wire left in, a penthouse stacked with million-dollar liars. And Julian was dead set on stomping my neck before I could detonate the whole damn thing. Meredith Sinclair crashed our little huddle, gripping her pearls for dear life while the room's lighting bounced off her iced-out fingers. Yo, Jules, your guy here begging for scraps? She chirped, serving up straight poison behind a fake-ass smile. I've got a few loose coins in my purse if his stomach's rumbling. Julian stepped up, invading my bubble, and the heat rolling off him was downright, choking a nasty mix of top-shelf liquor and raw, unfiltered terror. Scraps? I snapped back, finally planting my boots on solid ground. Listen here, playboy, you're literally flexing my golden years on your damn wrist and parking my retirement in your driveway. He just rolled his eyes, spinning some garbage too, the suits about my brain being too slow for the hustle of modern cash. Hold up before I blow the lid completely off this 50 grand con job. Drop a 1 in the comments if you think Julian needs his whole life wrecked, or smash 2 if Beatrice is the actual snake in the grass. Plus, hit me with a quick reason why. Quick heads up. I tweaked a few elements in this next part to really drive home what blind loyalty actually costs. You still riding with me? Pay attention. 50 G's. My mortgage. My old lady's peace of mind. This punk's flashy timepiece. The numbers were entirely bogus, but reality was finally kicking down the door. Spill it, kid. I roared, and the whole joint instantly went graveyard quiet, thick enough to choke on. Tell these folks how you sank $50,000 of my hard-earned cash into custom car seats. James Sterling pushed through the crowd, eyes narrowed like a hawk as he clocked the sweat pouring down his golden boy's face. Beatrice finally snapped out of her trance, but only to yank my sleeve. Pops! Chill out, she pleaded, sounding downright frantic. That money was a blessing. You handed it over with no strings. Homegirl was straight up trying to wash the debt clean on the spot, throwing my actual survival under the bus just to protect stupid designer suit. Julian looked like a walking heart attack as the head honcho of Sterling Tech marched up, demanding the real scoop on this so-called family favor. But right before that boy could even stutter, the entire block went pitch black. The darkness didn't just drift in. It dropped on us like a ton of bricks, killing the diamond sparkles and all those stuck-up stairs in one vicious, heart-stopping second. A second ago, this punk was bowing up on me, sweating through his fake tough guy act. Now, he was just a ghost hollering into a black hole that reeked of fried ozone and melted copper. The dead silence from the city's main grid was loud as hell, backed only by the dying screech of the tower's massive exhaust, fans spinning down. Absolute chaos ripped through the high rollers as the smart building's heartbeat flatlined. Julian, blind and backed into a corner, started swinging wild. Dude had zero clue his hot mic was still broadcasting, straight to the backup frequency. You set me up, didn't you? He shrieked, his voice breaking like a busted amp. You yanked a cable to make me look like a fool. You blue-collar trash. I skipped the last stress test to keep this drop cheap. And you sniffed out the one flaw. Beatrice was crying, begging him to shut up. Her voice was just a ragged whisper in the pitch. Julian, cut it. The whole room is listening. But the dude was far gone, his whole persona crumbling. Faster than the garbage network he built on fake promises. Complete meltdown. In a room full of digital phantoms, the only real things were the stench of burned wiring and the sound of Julian's life turning to ash. Red backup lights finally kicked on, throwing this creepy, bloody glow across the terrified faces of the top brass. I just stood there, stone cold, my union-trained ears picking up the exact stutters of the secondary generators, choking out. James. Sterling was standing right there, looking like a ghost in the red glare. The backup servers are dead, he snapped. At the tech crew, who were slapping away at frozen screens. This ain't supposed to happen. I scoped out the dead monitors and felt the hum of the freezing concrete right through my work boots. You got a firmware-hardware clash, I spit out, keeping my cool in the madness. You blew past the backup relay limit by 30%. You're trying to run a genius tower on a stupid-ass setup. Ain't it funny how when the lights cut out, the folks who supposedly run the block are the first ones crying like toddlers? Julian clawed his way toward me, his pricey blazer ripped to shreds, hunting for someone to blame while his boss looked at him like he was dirt. I dug into my pocket, fingering the card that chick in the parking deck slipped me. Then it caught my eye, a familiar flash. On the main diagnostic board, beating with the exact same rhythm I caught by the Tesla's tires. This blackout wasn't a bad break. It was a planned hit, set off by the same scrambler I spotted down on level P3. This wasn't a bug. Somebody had just stepped on the scene. The tower was holding its breath for a master pass that Julian was too dumb to know was real. I glanced at Beatrice, curled up next to a smashed glass statue, her perfect rich girl act blown to pieces. The pricey cologne floating around was getting swallowed up by the harsh, nasty stink of roasting motherboards. Out of nowhere, the backup elevator doors ripped open, hydraulics hissing loud as hell. A noise that sliced through the screaming like a gunshot. A shadow stepped right into the bloody red light, making every single person like a guy who belonged here. Suddenly, every suit in the room, Julian included, froze up. A tall silhouette appeared, throwing off this ice-cold, heavy boss energy that didn't need any. Backup lighting to make you sweat. The dead quiet that hit the room was way heavier than the actual blackout. The lady stepping out of the pitch black didn't look rattled at all from being stuck in a metal box. Nah. She looked like a walking hurricane, completely decked out in dark winter wool, carrying a calm that completely drowned out Julian's frantic yelling. Leonora Vance strolled right into the crimson glow of the backup lights. That loud, heavy slam of the lift shutting behind her hit, like a judge's gavel shutting down Julian's total meltdown. The gray streaks in her hair flashed under the spinning warning, strobes, making her look like some ghost town royalty standing over a fresh disaster. I knew who she was right away, catching that freezing, sharp smell of a winter blizzard still stuck to her heavy jacket. But to these corporate fat cats, she was a straight-up jump scare. Turns out, Leonora had rigged the whole lockdown manually. She used an old-school hard key that Julian was totally clueless about, proving once and for all that she owned this entire concrete jungle down to the studs, not just the fancy paint job. Julian was tripping over his own boots, his voice breaking like blown speakers. "Mrs. Vance, the forecast. They said your flight got pushed back," he stuttered, his face turning straight up pale, underneath that red glare. "A little rain doesn't slow me down, Julian," she fired back, her tone dropping low and lethal. "And neither does your absolutely garbage security setup." Julian scrambled, trying to play off the massive power failure as just some tiny technical glitch. But Leonora wasn't having a bar of it. True power ain't about keeping the damn lights on. It's about being the only person folks stare at when they're scared out of their minds in the pitch black. Leonora Vance was the blinding sun. James. Sterling tried stepping up to the plate, doing damage control by rolling out the red carpet for the big boss. Leonora, my deepest apologies. We've got our top tech guys handling this isolated blackout. She didn't even blink at his. Extended handshake, her piercing gaze sweeping the room like heat vision. Your so-called top tech guys are literally having panic attacks down in the server closet. James, I need a true heavy hitter, not some random wrench monkey. The VIP crowd, still, cowering in the dark corners, started muttering her name. It finally clicked that the absolute queenpin of Chicago property had dropped right into the middle of a total dumpster fire. Ain't it crazy how the most dangerous player in the room never has to yell? Leonora rolled through with a serious swagger that made the hair on your arms stand straight up. Julian stupidly tried to block her way, looking like a mix of a beaten dog and a guy trying to save his own skin. He vaguely pointed at the blacked-out city skyline, like he still called the shots up here. But Leonora looked right through him. She didn't give James Sterling the time of day, nor those terrified suits on the board. She made a beeline straight for me, her thick steel-toe boots stomping a heavy, unapologetic beat across that fancy marble flooring. I could feel that stupid VIP invite burning a hole in my pocket, the one demanding a tuxedo while black motor oil kept bleeding through my completely trashed tee. I was a walking eyesore in Julian's pristine little world. But Leonora pulled up right in my face. She dug into her coat and shoved a piece of paper forward, that exact same thick, fuzzy cardstock stamped with the shiny gold bird that I swore I'd tucked away. You dropped this? She asked, her voice slicing right through the dead air. Every single eyeball in the joint snapped to us. Those high-class board members were bug-eyed, looking back and forth from the absolute legend of the game to a filthy, grease-covered nobody. She didn't spare a glance for her executives and completely ignored the shaking coward who'd just trashed my name 5 minutes ago. Instead, she locked onto the sludge, staining my chest, and smirked, like she just dug up $1,000,000 out of a Tox trash can. That shiny card in her grip was a straight-up middle finger to everyone else in the room. The sharp corners of it caught the red warning strobes as she pushed past a bunch of billionaires just to check on the street-level guy they tried to kick out. I felt the serious weight of that fancy paper when Leonora Vance shoved it right back into my dirty hand, her piercing blue eyes locking dead onto mine. That icy smell of burning wood and Chicago winter radiating off her jacket clashed hard against the VIP room reeked of straight-up desperation. Julian was right up in my grill, his fancy imported necktie looking like it was about to snap his neck while he choked on a bunch of lies that just went up in smoke. I had no clue. Miss Vance, he sputtered, barely catching his breath, looking like walking death under those harsh crimson backup bulbs. He never mentioned running behind. Leonora wouldn't even give the dude the time of day. She broke down the dead quiet of the underground lot, how her luxury ride turned into a damn airtight coffin. Down there, with her oxygen clock ticking down, she let everyone know that while these so-called geniuses were popping bubbly on the penthouse level and arguing over cash flow, it took a blue-collar mechanic with grease stains and dirt packed deep in his cuticles getting down in the pitch black to pull her out alive. Then she dropped the bomb. She caught every word of Julian's little trash talk session over the facility's backup speakers right when she was trapped in that steel box. All that vicious garbage he spewed about working-class folks got logged right into the exact same surveillance grid he built to spy on everybody else. You labeled him a loose cannon, Julian? She pressed, sounding like absolute dead serious. If it wasn't for this guy, I'd be leaving this joint in a body bag, not standing in your penthouse. 1 second I was about to be a bloody mess on the pavement, and the next, I'm the only soul Leonora Vance gives a damn about. The high society crowd, and corporate suits gasped, the whole room's vibe flipping upside down in a heartbeat. Julian scrambled to save face, his hands shaking like crazy. "He's my dad, Leonora. We were just, man, we were just worried sick about how he was doing." Beatrice posted up in the corner, looking guilty as hell when she finally locked eyes with me. But Leonora wasn't letting that garbage excuse slide for a second. "You didn't give 2 cents about his well-being, Beatrice," she snapped, her voice slicing right through the dead, heavy, quiet of the room. "You only cared about how things looked. You were embarrassed by the very blood and sweat that put you on the map." Julian was like a flashy glass boat going down, looked slick, until the first hit of actual reality smashed into him. I saw the dude wither away while James Sterling and the rest of the suits backed off like his mess was some infectious disease. Leonora had flipped the 85th floor into a straight-up tribunal, and the guilty sentence was already stamped on Julian's sweaty forehead. She told the whole shocked room that her foundation's 200. The $1 million bag was strictly tied to solid character, something she just realized Julian was completely lacking. The $50,000 bomb I dropped a minute ago wasn't just some petty family beef anymore. It was the absolute kill shot to his whole career. She spun around, completely ghosting the board like they were cheap background props, and looked me dead in the face. What she said next was icy enough to freeze the bubbly right in Julian's glass. I was just standing there, mind blown, but finally feeling that sweet hit of payback. I was holding a card that felt way less like a corporate hookup and more like an all-access pass to a high-rise life that couldn't lock me out anymore. The vibe in the joint didn't just ice over, because the AC was busted. It froze because Leonora Vance was totally done playing nice, and her eyes were like a straight razor, ready to slice every ounce of fake respect off the Sinclair name. I didn't move a muscle, the dark engine grime on my clothes, feeling like a damn medal of honor under the flashing red emergency lights of the club. Leonora shifted her deadly gaze over to Meredith and Julian, her words cutting through the dead quiet with 50 years of pure boss energy backing them up. She dropped the info that she'd been the secret money behind my local union for over 10 years. She knew all about the complicated layouts I'd hustled over and the steel grids I'd locked down way before she ever bumped into me in that concrete lot. Julian trying to play me like some street-level nobody wasn't just a slap in the face. It was a straight-up lie she already had the receipts to torch. "I've spent 50 years putting this city on the map." "Meredith," she spat, her voice slicing through the freezing tension in the room. "We built this whole town on the busted backs of guys like Elias Thorne, not on the egos of rich kids who think daddy's money is a personality trait." You looked at the dirt on his shirt and saw trash. I saw a real one who didn't think twice about trashing his only good gear to save a life, while you were up here getting buzzed on expensive bubbles. I watched the high-class snobs catch the brutal shift in the room's energy, literally backing away from the Sinclairs like they were cursed. It was a straight-up public execution. That's what was going down. Bathed in the red glare of the emergency backups, the whole Sinclair empire was bleeding out on the floor, and no amount of cash or clout could patch it. Then Leonora locked onto my kid. Beatrice was shaking in the shadows, looking like she'd just seen a ghost. "How could you let these leeches brainwash you into thinking the man who put food on your table needed to be kept in the closet?" Leonora demanded. She didn't yell, but the raw edge in her tone sucked the oxygen right out of the room. "You really think your mom would be proud of a girl who kicks her own pops to the curb just to flex in a fancy gown?" Beatrice choked out a harsh, broken sob, her black makeup running down her face in messy, thick streaks. "Leonora, please, man," she gasped out, her voice barely squeaking past her throat. "I didn't mean it. You knew exactly what you were doing, Beatrice." Leonora clapped back, getting right in her face. "Keeping your mouth shut is a choice. You tried to fake a whole lifestyle, and now look at your base. It's as burnt out as this room. What's heavier? Huh? $50,000 in dirty money, or the crushing weight of a kid's guilt?" When she figures out she sold her own flesh and blood for a scam, nobody was throwing her a lifeline, just the brutal reality check of her own. Treason. The scent of dead smoke and cheap designer perfume choked the air like a funeral veil, right when the quiet got too heavy to handle. Meredith Sinclair finally moved up. Her face was scrunched up in a brand new, wildly desperate hustle. She didn't even grab for her boy. She straight up flipped on him. This was all Julian's play. "Leonora!" she shrieked, sounding wild and cornered. "He's the one who set this whole trashy deal up. I was just trying to keep the family name from looking like a joke." I watched Julian look like he'd been shot as his own mom threw him to the wolves just to stay in Leonora's wallet. Laying bare the absolute filth of the Sinclair family loyalty, Leonora just turned her back on a crying Beatrice, and she hit the head honcho of Sterling Tech with a dead-eyed stare that guaranteed an absolute massacre in the boardroom. "We gotta talk about the snakes you're jumping in bed with, Jimmy." What came next wasn't just dead air. It was the heavy, crushing thud of a billion-dollar hustle smashing to pieces on that fancy 85th floor tile. I was posted up in the creepy, blood-red haze of the backup lights, catching the cold sweat rolling down Jimmy Sterling's face while the massive pressure of Leonora's lethal glare glued him to the spot. Homegirl didn't even have to yell. The silence did the talking. She laid it out with a freezing, razor-sharp delivery that completely shut up every snobby rich suit in the joint. She made it crystal clear. Vance Holdings was pulling the plug on any crew rolling with a dirty, bottom-feeding leech, like Julian Sinclair. Jules tried cutting in, waving his hands around, swearing up and down that the $50,000 was just a legit business play. Leonora didn't even blink his way. She just dropped the bomb that her lawyers had a massive fraud lawsuit, locked and loaded while she was chilling in the parking garage. "You've got 72 hours to cough up every single penny back to Thorne." "Jules," she spit out, cutting through the shadows like a switchblade. "Miss that clock by a heartbeat, and I'll blow 10 times that cash, making damn sure you're flipping burgers for the rest of your life." Jimmy Sterling didn't even flinch. He knew his whole empire was hanging by a thread on her $200 million bankroll. "It's handled, Leonora," he choked out, shaking like a leaf. "Jules is dead to us. Pack your trash and get out." 72 hours. That was exactly how much time that clown had left in the fast lane. I swear I could hear his least ride getting towed already. An empty ring in a room where a dude just had his entire life erased in. A flash. I watched Jules' cocky smirk melt away, trading his swagger for the pure, shake-in-your-boots terror of a rat who knew his hustle had finally caught up to him. Then, that slow, annoying tick of the backup alarm started going off. Down the corridor, and the concrete literally shook under my steel toes while the skyscraper's guts fought a losing battle. The nasty stench of fried circuits hit my nose heavy, proving this billion-dollar piece of tech was completely tanking. Leonora spun back around, completely brushing off the broken mess of a man bleeding out on the rug. She locked eyes with those panicking, deer-in-the-headlights executives, and then brought her gaze right to my face. "Thorne," she called out, and for the very first time, she actually sounded like she gave me real props. These so-called geniuses just plunged my setup into total darkness. They threw up a fancy glass castle on pure mud. Mine stepping up and schooling these punks on how a real mechanic gets down. Funny how quick these high rollers start begging for a grease monkey to bail them out the minute their automated toys crash out. I stared down at my grimy, stained knuckles, then over to the flashy backup panels that were doing exactly jack squat right now. The grids tapped out. "Vance," I fired back, my brain already tracing the fried connections. "This thing needs a hardcore, hands-on override, not some weak app update." It hit me right then that getting this skyscraper breathing again wasn't just about doing her a solid. I was about to rescue the exact same gig that Punk Jules tried to bury me with. I checked the motor oil dried on my cuffs, shot a cold glare at the suits who treated me like dirt 2 minutes ago. Point me to the mainframe, I demanded. Dead, serious and locked in. I wasn't just some washed-up nobody anymore. I was the absolute last dude breathing who could flip the switch back on. Down in the brain of the building, it was supposed to be a neon church of flashing lights and massive roaring fans. But nah. It was a straight-up graveyard of dead metal, reeking of melted plastic that Jules's squad of overpaid nerds were scared out of their minds to go near. I shoved right through the mob of jittery tech kids trying to force a reboot. That was never going to happen, looking like ghosts in the dark. I didn't even sweat their keyboards, making a beeline directly to the heavy breaker boxes, the hardcore iron guts of the tower where the actual magic goes down. I spotted a shady line of code buried in the main drives, some slick little trapdoor Jules snuck in so he could play hero later on and flex for the big money backers. But just like every other hustle he ran, it was a garbage job, and the whole network spiraled into a massive, unstoppable meltdown. Back up off the deck, kid, I barked at some suit-wearing rookie banging on his laptop. You're trying to patch up a bullet wound with a piece of tape. The punk stuttered back, whining that the screen showed everything was green. I just shook my head at the disrespect. Your screen ain't smelling the smoke, bro, I fired back, but I definitely do. Listening close to the hum, I tracked down the busted circuit that Jules's cheap-ass budget cuts pushed over the edge. I clocked a nasty clash between the gear and the code, where the safety valves were getting strangled by his fake glitch. Snap, flash, dead quiet. The whole damn skyscraper paused while I grabbed the main line. I flipped open my busted old toolbox and yanked out a basic strip of copper wire. Old school grit, about to revive a billion-dollar tech empire. With rock steady, ice. Meanwhile, I had ripped right into the main electrical grid, straight up hot-wiring the tower's guts to completely jump over that hacked artificial intelligence garbage. That thick copper wiring practically melted through my leather grips right when I slammed the last breaker into position. The heavy, booming thud of those massive voltage switches slamming shut ripped through the space like some sleeping monster finally catching a breath. You could feel the concrete vibrating again, that burnt air smell clearing out once the heavy-duty ventilation systems kicked into overdrive. Time to turn the juice back on, I muttered under my breath. The real deal. Suddenly, a blinding flash of 4,000 Kelvin white illumination washed out the whole hallway, shooting straight up from the basement through every single floor. I stepped out of the mainframe closet, smearing dirt off my brow with a dirty flannel shirt, only to spot Leonora Vance standing right there. She completely ignored those corporate suits and that terrified squad of computer geeks. Nah. She locked eyes with me, giving me mad respect. So, what's it like to jump from being a supposed risk to holding all the power in this place in under 60 minutes? I am done with dreamers. Elias, she stated, not stuttering for a second. I need a real boss. I am putting you up as head of technology operations for Vance Enterprises. You are going to be running 47 massive spots all over the map. Look, lady, I just pull wire down in Bridgeport. I shot back, even though my heart was basically pounding out of my ribs. Wrong, she fired back, tapping me right on the collarbone. You are the guy stopping everything from totally blacking out. The paycheck she threw at me made Julian's little executive deal looked like chump change, but the real kicker was getting the green light to rip apart every single job Julian Sinclair ever put his grubby hands on. I shook on it, and it wasn't even about the cash. It was strictly for that priceless look of horror on Julian's face finding out. His ultimate superior was the same dude he just tried to curb stomp. I was done being the invisible guy pulling cables in the shadows. I officially ran the whole show. A couple hours deep, I caught up with Beatrice chilling by the ledge of the sky deck, her shadow cutting hard across the downtown Chicago grid. She practically traded her humanity for this life, and I could see her staring into the heavy-duty window pane, shaking like some busted fuse about to spark out. That fake, Pumped-in air up on the 85th story chilled my bones way worse than the winter breeze, screaming against the outside windows. She whipped around when my work boots hit the concrete, makeup completely wrecked down her cheeks, showing a vibe I hadn't caught off her in 3 solid years. Pure, unfiltered guilt. "Pop, I can't even find the words to make this right," she muttered, sounding completely torn up. I just yanked out my cell, letting that harsh screen light paint both our expressions while I pulled up the log. "You rode with that punk instead of your old man when the chips were down, Beatrice. And this ain't just about tonight." I shoved the display right in her face, watching her freeze up. 37 ignored calls over the last 3 months alone. 37 times I tried checking in on my one and only kid. 37 times you let it go straight to voicemail. March 15th. I rattled off. "Hit your line 'cause I caught a glimpse of Clara's photo online. You dodged me so you could play nice eating with Julian's corporate buddies." She slapped her hand over her lips. April 3rd. Reached out begging to come see Clara blow out her candles. You completely ghosted me. Mother's Day. I pushed on, my throat feeling like it was packed with glass. Dialed you up 'cause I was drowning missing your mother. You finally shot me a text at 11 at night talking about some fancy Sinclair brunch. Beatrice just collapsed right onto that icy seat, letting her high-end fabric drag on the dirt. I was terrified they were going to strip me of everything I earned. Julian got inside my head, swearing that keeping you around was a massive bad look. Then guess what? You didn't just cut me off, kiddo. You played yourself. You completely erased the girl your mama brought up in this world. She stared right back at me and pulled a move I hadn't witnessed since she was a little tyke. She completely dropped off that seat, hitting the freezing cement on her knees, clawing onto my rough palms like she was drowning. "I messed up so bad, Daddy," she sobbed, dropping a word I haven't heard out of her mouth in over 6 months. "I let these snakes make me think you were some kind of embarrassment. I picked Julian's gold stars over my own blood. I dropped you when things got heavy. I reached down and hauled her right back up onto her 2 feet, using my calloused grip to lock down her trembling shoulders. Right then, Margaret flashed through my head, along with the swear I made back in that hospital room. Look, B, I'm giving you a pass, but trust takes a minute to earn back. You wrecked something deep inside me that one night of crying can't glue together. I gotta know I'm your main priority now. Not chasing Julian's clout. Not begging for Meredith's thumbs up. Just me." She gave a jerky nod, her whole frame trembling. "It's you, Pops. Always." I was tripping the whole time. I yanked her in close, feeling her just give out and slump against my grease-covered flannel, just like she did back in the day. We just posted up on that lookout deck, 2 banged-up souls, trying to figure out if real loyalty could survive a backstab, while the downtown grid flashed below us like 1,000 do-overs just waiting to get grabbed. Jump cut to a month down the line. I'm posted up on the 82nd floor of the Apex Towers training lab, watching the winter sun carve shadows over a crew of rookie tech heads. They reminded me why I busted my ass in this game for 40 years. Place reeked of dark roast, sterile circuit boards, and pure hustle. Leonora Vance went all out, dropping serious bank on this setup. But the main attraction was a basic timber workbench I threw together in my Bridgeport garage 30 years back. Forget that shiny new code. I barked at the 15 fresh faces locked on me. This is about feeling the raw, physical truth of the juice. Programs spin lies, wires don't. I grabbed my trusty strippers. The rubber basically fused to my grip after all this time. A young blood named Sarah Miller shot, her hand up. "Mr. Thorne, the whole game runs on auto scanners now. Why sweat the analog stuff?" I smirked, flashing back to the pure panic on Leonora's face when her fancy ride turned into a digital death trap. "Listen, Sarah, when the screens swear everything's smooth, but you hear a transformer whining and catch that burnt metal scent in the air, you gotta bet on your gut, not a monitor." I burned the next 60 minutes drilling them on the manual override, move that kept the Apex from burning down. These kids were raised on touchscreens and swiping. I was schooling them in the old school gospel of raw voltage and dead resistance. Around mid-morning, my phone buzzed with an alert that stopped me dead. My debut check from Vance Holdings dropped, and the digits were so crazy I had to triple check the screen. But the real kicker? A totally different drop. $63,000 tagged as squared-up debt from Sinclair J. Every single penny of my nest egg, plus the juice, handed right back. On my lunch break, Sarah rolled up on me holding a tightly gripped magazine. "Thorne, I just gotta give you your flowers. My pops was a wire jockey back in the day, too. He got taken out by an arc flash when I was 12. Seeing how you saved the apex made me see his hustle actually meant something." She passed me the December drop of modern grid and infrastructure, and boom, my mug in the shop was on the cover. The bold print screamed, "The Thorne Benchmark. Why tomorrow's smart cities need old-school muscle," but a little side column made my heart skip a beat. The Sinclair implosion. A warning. Julian was officially a boogeyman for corporate rookies. Living proof of what goes down when your pride writes checks your skills can't cash. I was cementing my name with street cred and hard work. His name was drowning in yellow police tape and damage control. My cell vibrated. Text from Bia, "Pops, Clara and me are sliding through tomorrow. She's dying to check out your garage setup. We good?" My thumbs shook as I fired back. "More than good, kiddo." Doors open. Next morning, I was chilling in the Bridgeport garage, breathing in that sharp cedar scent while putting the finishing touches on the mini mansion I'd resurrected from pure rubble. Back when I dug those busted splinters out of Sinclair's garbage, I straight up broke down and cried. But a real wire boss knows you can fix the most fried systems if you got the heart. I built that thing like a tank, beefed up the framing, and wired a killer new power grid right into the hidden roof. Crawl space. I took that old picture of Margaret rocking a newborn bee and glued it dead center where it belonged. Gravel crunching outside made my pulse jump. Bee's beat-up ride rolled onto the concrete. The rear door flew open and Clara burst out, a chaotic blur of blonde curls rocking Margaret's tough guy jawline. "Grandpa Elias," she yelled. "Mom claims you make cool stuff." I dropped to my knees on the freezing pavement as she charged me with zero hesitation. She slammed into me, and I squeezed her tight, letting the ghost of every missed party just melt away against her tiny frame. "I make all kinds of crazy stuff, little bird. Want to take a peek?" I walked them down to the shop. Soon as we hit the bottom of the steps, I hit the juice, and Clara gasped out loud. The vintage playhouse owned the middle of the work table, looking flashier than ever. "Is that mine?" Clara whispered in shock. "All yours, kiddo," I told her, scooping her into the air. "But the real trick doesn't start until you hit the power." I steered her little hand toward the tiny brass toggle. She flicked it down with a heavy snap, and every single window lit up the room in a blazing gold glow. Clara lost her mind, straight up squealing, but I put a gentle hand on her shoulder to slow her roll. "Hold up a second. Little mama, I tucked something real special deep inside this joint. Let's see if you can hunt it down." She popped open that tiny little attic hatch, real slow, and slid out an old picture, a faded shot of Margaret cradling baby Beatrice. "Who's the lady, Pops?" she asked. I swallowed hard. "That's your grandma, Margaret. Man, she would have been absolutely crazy about you. And that little infant right there? That's your mama." Clara stared hard at the picture, taking it all in, before turning to Beatrice, who was straight up bawling right there in the room. "You look happy, Ma." Beatrice wiped her face. "I was over the moon, baby girl. Because Grandma and Grandpa, Elias rode for me so hard, the exact same way we ride for you." While the kid went back to messing with the dollhouse, Beatrice took in the dusty workbench, and all those pictures of Margaret I just couldn't bear to rip off the walls. "Damn, I should have brought her to this spot a long time ago," she whispered. "Ain't no clock on doing the right thing." "Bea," I told her. "The point is, we're standing right here, right now." She looked me dead in the eye. "Pops, Leonora actually hit me up to run community outreach over at Vance Holdings. It's a legit hustle, Dad. Finally bridging those big money developments with the real blocks. You know, places exactly like Bridgeport. Rough around the edges, but real. That's the kind of hustle your mama would have respected, I told her. Nah, Pops, she fired back, her tone softening up. It's a grind, I'm proud of myself. Right as the freezing December sun dipped low, Clara locked eyes with me, rocking that exact same soul-piercing, crystal blue stare her grandmother Margaret used to have. Hey, Grandpa Elias, she whispered. You gonna show me how to wire up the lights? I scooped the kid right up and sat her on my knee. Listen to me, little bird, I told her straight. I'm dropping every ounce of street knowledge and spark plug wisdom I got onto you. Long as I'm breathing, your world ain't ever going dark. Count on that. 3 days later, I was posted up in the doorway of my Bridgeport dining room, staring down a table packed with the exact same crew who had once tried to wipe my name right off the map. The whole joint smelled like a massive roasted turkey, a mouth-watering masterpiece my Margaret had spent 30 years getting down to an absolute science. But this time was different. For the first time since we put her in the ground, I wasn't just throwing down a feast for a bunch of lingering ghosts. Beatrice was catching a groove, bustling around the kitchen counters, while little Clara was parked at the table, sketching out one of those gratitude trees. I caught a glimpse of my granddaughter scratching out these wobbly little letters, Grandpa Elias and his lighthouse. Right at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the front buzzer went off. Pushing open the screen door, I found Meredith and Richard Sinclair posted up on my porch. The two high society snobs looked like they were sweating bullets, entirely out of their element. Meredith was gripping some cheap bakery pie like her life depended on it, trembling out of her mind. Elias, Richard finally choked out. We appreciate you opening your doors to us. I slid out of the doorway so they could step inside. Good thing you showed, I told him flatly. Margaret always preached that this holiday was specifically about bringing nothing but raw, unfiltered truth to the dinner table. Meredith's eyes immediately welled up. Elias, I owe you a massive apology. Hell, mere words can't even cover the damage I've done, she cried. I brainwashed my own boy into thinking blue-collar folks like you were street trash. My own toxic ego ripped my family to shreds. That's water under the bridge, Meredith, I shot back. But you step into my territory today. You play by the Thorne family playbook. We keep it 100% real. We don't disrespect nobody. And we never, ever forget that a guy who hustles and bleeds for his paycheck is worth just as much as any suit on Wall Street. With the air cleared, we all headed into the dining room. I posted up right at the head of the table, the undisputed boss of the house. Richard took the far side, while Beatrice flanked my right and Clara took my left. You didn't need a map to read the room. The gritty, hard-knock Sparky from the Bridgeport blocks was finally getting his respect as the rock-solid backbone of this entire bloodline. While we were passing the plates, Clara piped up to say the blessing. Lord, thanks so much for my Grandpa Elias, 'cause he fixes absolutely everything. Thanks for my mama, who's figuring out how to be tough. Thanks for that awesome dollhouse that actually lights up. And most of all, thanks that even when families completely short-circuit and break apart, they can be rewired and patched up just like Grandpa's electrical boxes. Amen to that. The spread wasn't flawless, but it was authentic, raw, and totally ours. Once we finished tearing through the food, Meredith slid up to me, gripping a thick envelope. Look, this ain't a handout or a guilt trip, Elias. Consider it seed money, she insisted. Richard and I are looking to drop serious cash on a full-ride grant for kids grinding it out in trade schools. We're hoping to brand it the Margaret Thorne Memorial Scholarship, assuming you'd give us the green light. My old lady would have been over the moon about that, I told them. Once the snobs finally hit the road, my cell vibrated. A text from Beatrice. Pops, thanks for putting up with everything today. Clara's begging for us to grab lunch tomorrow. Just the three of us on some low-key vibes. She's dying to hear old tales about Mom. Honestly, I've got a million things I wish I'd asked her back in the day. Love you deeply. I'm kicking myself for taking this damn long to finally wake up to what actually matters in this life. I shot a message right back. Tomorrow, straight at 12 noon, I'll whip up your mama's legendary lasagna. And B, love you back. Never stopped, not for a single second. I took a long, hard look around my spot. The beat-up couches, the scuffed-up walls, the concrete roots that had stood, tall against every storm. You don't size up a man by how high up in a corporate skyscraper he sits, but by the bulletproof foundation he pours for the crew coming up behind him. My ultimate flex was the beacon I kept glowing, making damn sure my bloodline could always navigate their way back to the block. The thick aroma of roasted turkey mixed with fresh pine was still hanging heavy in my gritty Bridgeport kitchen. But the best damn smell in the room was the total absence of panic. Just the smooth, low-key hum of a life that was finally vibrating on the right frequency. I was posted, up by the burner, zoning out on the steam rolling off the gravy, while running my fingers over the house keys sitting light as a feather in my pocket. Those keys carried a whole new vibe tonight. That crazy interest Leonora slapped onto my recovered pension stash didn't just pull me out of the gutter and into the green. It was a fat enough stack to wipe out the mortgage on this beat-up crib in one shot. For the first time ever, I was the undisputed king of my own castle. And after years of grinding, these walls finally stopped feeling like they were suffocating me over a mountain of debt I could never outrun. Beatrice was chilling at the counter, totally stripped of that pricey Gold Coast silk and entirely done sizing me up through that toxic lens of high society embarrassment. Rocking just a basic wool pullover, she was throwing down with the potato masher, leaving her cell phone totally ghosted on the charger. Clara was kicked back at the table, humming some catchy tune while she scribbled a picture of a big old crib, lit up with glowing yellow windows. Man, I totally spaced on how incredible this place smells when the oven's been blasting all afternoon. B murmured. Her tone smooth and completely stripped of that icy, calculated edge she used to walk around with. It smells like our turf. B, I fired back, keeping a steady rhythm. On the wooden spoon. That's a flavor no five-star chef can fake. Real legacy ain't about slapping your name on some corporate high-rise. It's about whose calloused hands you reach for when the whole city blacks out. The banter around the dinner table was smooth as butter, bouncing between wild tales from the old block and the fresh blood grinding it out in my electrical apprenticeship crew. We didn't waste a single breath talking about venture. Man, all that corporate hustling and fake paper wealth finally crumbled. Right after dinner, some delivery guy rolled up with a rush package from Leonora Vance. I tore that joint open and pulled out the newest edition of modern grid and infrastructure, literally the Bible, for our line of work. The slick cover caught the glare from our Christmas lights, showing off a raw, bossed-up shot of me holding it down in my garage. The bold print screamed, "King of the grid. Why tomorrow's smart cities need real blue-collar muscle." That spread had me looking like the absolute top dog of the game, breaking down how I saved the Apex building. As proof that street-smart grit smokes corporate ego every single time. The pages felt slick as hell, but my hands? Still scarred up and rough. Exactly how the universe is supposed to balance out. "Peep this. Pops," Beatrice said, soft like, tearing up as she ran her fingers over. "My printed name. You're a whole legend in their circles now." "Nah, B." I hit her back, feeling that deep, righteous payback in my soul. "I'm just a regular wire jockey who stuck it out in the trenches long enough to claim the crown." Flipping through, I caught a tiny side column that shut down the whole operation for good. They dropped Julian Sinclair's name, not hyping him up as some big-shot innovator, but dragging him as the ultimate example of a massive, boss-level screw-up. Dude was straight up turning into a boogeyman for college business majors. A walking red flag about letting your ego outrun your morals. I snapped the book shut, my eyes drifting to the vacant seat that Margaret was supposed to be chilling in, then over to my kid rocking her exact same smirk. Right then, it hit me. The Sinclair crew didn't just blow their cash. They fumbled the only real stuff that counts in this life. I snatched my rep back, got my turf back, and, most crucially, I dragged the real story out into the light. I watched the snow dumping down hard and silent past the glass, realizing I had one final mission to handle before the clock ran out on the year. The graveyard was completely untouched, just a heavy sheet of white covering the only woman I ever gave a damn about showing out for. Dropping to my knees by Margaret's grave, the freezing dirt felt like the realest, most grounded thing I had touched in forever. I wiped the ice off her nameplate with my winter gloves, the stone freezing and stubborn as hell under my touch. My chest tightened up when I spotted a brand new bunch of winter jasmine posted right at the pod. Bottom, Margaret's absolute go-to flower. Beatrice had slid through on the low before I got here, dropping off an "I'm sorry." I knew she wasn't brave enough to spit to my face yet. That was the universe telling me the family ties weren't just patched up. They were actually packing real juice again. I dug into my heavy jacket and yanked out that copy of Modern Grid and Infrastructure. Slipping it inside a waterproof bag, I wedged it tight up against her monument. One last status update for the Queen, who always kept me heading in my true north. I held it down like I swore I would. Maggie, I mumbled into that vicious south side freeze. I refused to let her reality fade out into the black. Even when she tried to block my shine, I gave her the whole rundown. How we bailed out Leonora, how we took back our crib, and the way Clara stares at me with those exact same eyes. Tombstones don't talk back. They just soak it all up. Honestly, it's the realest sounding board a dude like me could ever get. I owned up to my own screw-ups those times I let the slow grind. Have me walking around like a dead man instead of the absolute boss I am. But the energy in the Thorne house is blazing strong once more. Maggie, Clara inherited your jawline and your zero-tolerance attitude. That girl is going to be completely solid. I got back on my feet, my massive steel toes crunching through the powder like a vault slamming shut, with the sun ducking out on 2025. Throwing deep violet shades across the tombstones, I strutted back to my pickup. Way out there, the Chicago skyline was already sparking up for the New Year's Eve fireworks. A million different people getting ready to hit the reset button. The whole concrete jungle was basically a giant motherboard of a million lives. And for the first time ever, I wasn't just blocking the energy. I was the damn power source. I checked the distance and caught those red warning lights on the apex building pulsing like a heartbeat. That tower wasn't flexing my lockout, or Julian's massive ego anymore. It was a straight-up trophy of my own grind, a network I saved from flatlining when the stakes were sky high. I hopped into the driver's seat and caught a pop-up on my screen. My very first cut from the Vance. The training patent had officially hit the bank, a bag so heavy it made my old double shifts look like loose change. Right then, a breaking news banner slid across the bottom of my screen. Julian Sinclair just waved the white flag, dropping a Chapter 7 bankruptcy filing. His whole legacy was completely wiped from the streets he swore he ran. "Happy New Year, Maggie," I said, cranking the engine. "Keep an eye on us from up there." I was riding a wave of silent, untouchable dominance, knowing I was officially calling the shots on my own mental switchboard. I rolled out past the graveyard iron and cruised toward the glowing blocks of Bridgeport. I knew deep down that even if the entire grid blacked out right now, I could still navigate my way back to my front door blindfolded. The family name was bulletproof, the tabs were all settled, and the old dog finally had peace of mind. A real man's value isn't graded by how tall his penthouse is, but by whether he's got the guts to keep the power running for the folks still stuck in the gutter. I posted up in my dead-silent Bridgeport garage on the first morning of the new year, watching the moonlight bounce right off the watch, staring at the spotless, squared-away gear that had literally saved my neck and protected my name. Reaching for my heavy-duty steel rig, I spotted a crumpled-up little scrap of paper wedged right under the grip. It was a messy crayon sketch from Clara, drawing me decked out in a bright red superhero cape gripping a giant pipe wrench. That kid didn't give a damn about the flashy Lake Forest penthouse or those iced-out watches. She just looked straight at me and saw the guy who could patch up the shattered pieces. Real talk, that was the most genuine respect I'd gotten in 40 solid years. I took a massive breath, letting that strong kick of sawdust and floor polish act like medicine for my exhausted chest. I stood there, taking stock of the life I had just clawed back from the edge. It hit me hard, looking at the massive gap between all of Julian's phony hype and the actual weight of a real man's spine. The Sinclair crew built their whole flashy empire on blown fuses. Looked pretty as hell, but completely dead when it came to carrying any real juice. But my life? Yeah, it got beat up by the grind and held together by elbow grease on 100 midnight shifts. But it was finally wired right. I grabbed my master, electrician ticket, the paper still crisp and legit, and framed it up dead center on the drywall right beside the picture of Margaret. "You called it, Maggie," I muttered, my throat catching with a heavy, hard-earned piece. It's all about the bedrock. If a person's heart is wired totally wrong, the rest of the house is just waiting to burn to the pard ground. My mind drifted to Beatrice and Julian, completely stripped of their fake flex, sitting dead quiet inside their cramped little apartment. When it comes down to it, we're all just carrying whatever juice we choose to let flow, and their circuits just completely fried out. I ran my rough, calloused hands over the freezing steel of the main breaker I just rigged up for the shop's upgraded sub-panel. I slammed it home, and it locked in with a thick, satisfying clank. Up on the main floor, I caught the deep, steady kick of the furnace, kicking out that low hum that just screams, "You're safe and sound." The streets outside were freezing, but the current running through my spot was flawless. My tablet buzzed one last time with a ping from Leonora Vance's corporate suits. They were putting the final ink on the fresh maintenance playbook for the whole Apex grid. Every single skyscraper she owned was about to get locked down by a hardcore set of hands-on protocols, making damn sure no glitchy tech garbage would ever leave a family freezing in the dark again. They didn't bury this rule under some soulless corporate jargon or tech gibberish. They straight up stamped it the Thorne standard. It was the kind of rep that didn't need some shiny gold plaque plastered in a lobby. This was a legacy breathing right there in the safety of every soul inside. I stared at the silhouette my tools cast on the concrete, catching a vibe of peace that runs way thicker than cash or clout. I had fixed the high rise. I locked down my granddaughter's trust fund. And real talk, the biggest win was fixing the dude, staring back in the mirror. I killed the lights in the shop. The pitch black didn't feel like a coffin anymore. Heading up those stairs, the absolute heat of my home proved the lights were never going out on me again. Looking in the rearview mirror now, I see this was never really about the paper, the ego, or a toxic family tie. This whole messed up drama made me stare down a brutal reality about my own self. I was convinced that if I just hustled harder, bled more, and handed my kid the world, the respect would automatically roll in. But you can't build love when the foundation is just you shutting up and bleeding out. If you're tuning into this crazy family saga, let me put you up on game. Real talk. Don't ghost your own life the way I did. For years, I just kept taking the hits, kept writing the checks, and kept praying they'd wake up. The streets might look at my payback and label it some petty boomer vengeance. But it's way deeper than that. My get back was never about wrecking my own blood or putting my haters in the dirt. It was straight up about taking back my crown. Sometimes, the hardest flex a father can pull is just refusing to let some scrubs slap a price tag on his life. If you pull one piece of wisdom from this wild ride, make it this. Never mistake wiping yourself out for showing love. A parent can bleed themselves dry and still watch the family bounce if the respect is gone. Don't wait until you're shattered to stand up for your name. Draw your lines in the sand on day one. Spit the raw truth and never drop your head for putting in honest sweat. I truly believe the man upstairs put me through the ringer to show me that a man's spine is worth a hell of a lot more than his zip code. So, if you carry anything away from my story, keep this in mind. Real grit isn't about how many punches you can eat without making a sound, but having the guts to keep your fire burning when the whole world tries to snuff it out. Good looking out. For riding with me all the way to the end of this tape, drop a comment below and let me know what's on your mind. What's your move if you were in Elias's boots, backed into a corner, choosing between your own pride and your flesh and blood? I'm genuinely trying to see how y'all would play it. If my journey hit close to home, smash that subscribe button so you're locked in for the next drops. Quick, heads up, even though this joint pulls heavy from real street situations and actual struggles, a few details got amped up to make the story hit harder. If this kind of ours, hey, if this heavy real talk family drama ain't exactly your lane, feel free to keep scrolling and catch a vibe that fits your style.